was small windows, layering throws, and that's what's going to take if you're going to throw the ball a ton against this defense. So that's something that I think to keep an eye on. And again, I'm glad that Sam's not playing in this game because that's stuff that he struggles with tremendously. Is it going to be easy for Jacoby? No, it's not going to be.
Hasn't been easy for anybody this year.
Right. It's going to be tough, but I think there is a path to offensive production with Jacoby, but it's going to be very, very challenging. And we talked about how good the Jets defense was. This defense to me is better. It's just better coached. Things are a little bit tighter. They're more consistent. And that's saying a lot because the Jets defense is amazing. So
I was going to ask, how similar are they structurally?
They're pretty similar.
You have obviously Saleh, the former DC, now 2 DCs ago, but like I'd imagine he took a lot of what he was doing in San Francisco to New York, and thus they look pretty similar, even if their emphasis are a little bit different.
Yeah, very similar. They kind of are like that day one quarters install, but they still run a little bit of cover 3. They still run 2. I think they run less man, I would say. They still run man, but they're like the Jets ran a ton of man. And I think this team, I'd have to look at the numbers, but it feels like when you watch them, they're a little bit less man heavy. So, but again, it doesn't really matter because they're so good at matching in their zone structures and anticipating throws and making plays in the football. So it's going to be a tough matchup, especially if that pass rush is cooking, and that pass rush can cook. So tough matchup offensively for the Commanders, but I think at least with Jacoby, there is a path, a vision where you can get some of those higher leverage throws and maybe make some plays and get some offensive production.
Yeah, staying out of a terrible game flow for once would be nice. Obviously we'll see how they can do that. And then defensively, again, they're playing better. The bar was somewhere 6 feet under the floor in terms of what better meant. But they are playing better.
Yeah.
But this San Francisco offense generates space. It generates big plays. It does everything. I'd say if you keep them under 30, that's a hell of a win, considering the two sides doing battle here.
And again, like the San Francisco 49ers don't traditionally like run away with games because they're perfectly content with running the football and kind of keeping it, deleveraging Brock Purdy. And I think this week, especially because of the offensive line injuries that they've suffered, I think you're going to see a much more conservative approach offensively. So, they present a ton of issues. Like if they were healthy right now, I'd be like, I don't know what we're going to do. Because one of the things that this defense has struggled since Ron has been back is I think they've struggled a little bit stopping the run. And you're going to see a lot of running stuff. You're going to see, we just talked about how they're going to try and get you in. Like Ron, I think, has done a good job of saying we're going to get into these more conservative coverage structures, deleverage the corners, take some off those guys' plates. And that's worked great, but you're playing light boxes. And at San Fran, I don't think you can do that. But the second you get in those heavy run structures, they're going to hit play action shots. They're going to hit drifts.
The second that Ron's like, hey, Mayo, get in there, George Kittle's going to be running up a seam and troubles.
And so that's the only thing that gives me some solace is that they are banged up on the offensive line. Trent's not going to play. They're really effective running the left side of the offensive line when he's in because obviously he's like the best tackle in football. But, he's not going to play. I think they're going to sign a guy. They've signed a couple guys off other practice squads that are going to be here. So how effective is that group? Because while the scheme does take a lot of pressure off the offensive line, like you talked about with Brock Purdy, they are really nuanced and very detailed with the rules. So how can you get those guys all on the same page for this game on a short week? It's going to be very challenging for them. But because of all the stuff they do offensively, it's going to be a tough lift for the defense. And then that's not even talking about the physical matchups. Like how do you match up with Kittle, who's got Debo? How do you handle all the motions and shifts that they do? Ayuk is playing everyone talks about Debo, but he's playing better than Debo right now. Christian McCaffrey is a matchup nightmare. He's like a slot receiver that can run the football. So a lot of issues there that Ron's going to have to contend with this week.
Yeah, it's there's a reason they're them. That's the easiest way to put it. That's the team I picked to win the Super Bowl. Still feel pretty good about it. Obviously, Baltimore's got something to say about that, as will some other teams. But they are excellent. They are well built. They are well schemed. They are well everythinged, which is why they are seen as one of the models around the NFL, and why so many of their people have gone on to other places already. And we anticipate that continuing this offseason, perhaps even some of them coming here. That is our show for today. We will talk more on Sunday about this game and about some of the big picture things that we have discussed. And we'll do that on the Take Command pregame show, which you can listen to live on 106.7 The Fan and the Team 980 and watch on YouTube. In the meantime, make sure you check me out on the radio, The Hoffman Show, 4 to 7 daily on the Team 980. That also streams live on YouTube at the Team 980 and highlights on my page at Craig Hoffman. Logan, of course, you can catch on Command Center and so much of the Commanders stuff, and follow on Instagram at Logan_Paulsen82. For Logan, I'm Craig. We'll see you Sunday at Tap Sports Bar for Take Command. Good morning, and welcome in to the Take Command pregame show. I am Craig Hoffman. He is Logan Paulsen, and we are off and running on a burgundy and gold game day, 106.7 The Fan, the Team 980. And Logan, this is not the show that we thought we would have this morning when you and I last spoke on Thursday for the Take Command podcast. The latest news, we'll get you started right with it from Adam Schefter and Nikki Javala, of course ESPN and the Washington Post respectively, is that it is unexpected for Jacoby Brissett to play today. So after we spent all week, Howell's on the bench, what does it mean? What does it mean for Brissett? What's it mean for the team, the organization, the franchise? All of us were right back where we were, kind of. I actually want to dive into this a little bit, but just a chronology of events in case people have checked out and are checking back in on the actual game day. Sam Howell, obviously not very good the last couple of weeks, been benched 2 weeks in a row. He then, Ron Rivera says after the game, we'll evaluate the quarterback position, which is coach speak for. We're going to make a change, but we need to watch the tape to make sure, / that feels like the right thing to do versus being rational in the immediate aftermath of yet another devastating loss, in which Sam Howell, if I'm remembering correctly off the top of my head, Logan, threw for 52 yards. So, not great. They did indeed make that change. They announced it Wednesday instead of Monday because the players had Monday off. Monday was Christmas. They waited till the players got back, told the players, and then Jacoby Brissett takes your reps as quarterback one during Wednesday practice. Sometime during the Thursday practice, he feels a tweak in his hamstring. Is like, uh-oh, that's not good.
Right.
They somehow keep that quiet after practice. There's no media availability after practice on Thursdays, and that allowed them to keep things quiet until all of a sudden Friday, Rivera speaks before practice and is like, hey, by the way, Jacoby hurt his hamstring yesterday. He's going to be questionable for the game. He was listed as a limited participant in practice on Friday, so I was like, I don't know. It seems like he'll probably play, but things have not progressed well, Logan, and that leaves us where we are now, where Schefter reported at midnight, which is basically he gets told a bunch of stuff, and then he unleashes a bunch of tweets at midnight. Like, hey, you have to hold on this till Sunday. Okay, 12:01 a.m.
Boom. Yeah.
Jacoby Brissett, unlikely to play today. They are going to put him through a warm-up. We will definitely be following the reporting this morning here on the Take Command pregame show. But, Logan, here we are. Sam Howell likely back as QB1 today.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, when we did that podcast on Wednesday or Thursday, whatever it was, I kind of felt like it was the right decision to sit Sam down. I don't think he'd been playing well enough to deserve the starting role. And I think, a lot of people have said, he should play kind of regardless of, the situation, given the year. We got to figure out what he is. And I don't know, man, just watching him over the last 3 or 4 weeks, he just seems to have hit a spot where he's not seeing it very well, not feeling it very well. So I did feel like for his development and just for the general coaching process of the athlete, I thought it was a good opportunity to kind of say, hey, man, let's just take a breather real quick. Let's reset the systems a little bit, kind of restart the computer and see if we can get back to kind of a good homeostasis. And, maybe he plays against Dallas. I don't know. But I felt like it was something that needed to happen. So it's interesting to see kind of how the psychology of that decision plays out. And then he's going to start in this game as well. I think that'll be something really interesting to keep an eye on. And I hope that Sam goes out and balls. I really hope to see that today. I will say my confidence level of that happening is not very high. I think when you look at the San Francisco defense, which we'll talk more about later, they're just really well coached. The windows are very small. You need to throw with high levels of anticipation. You're going to get a ton of pass rush. All the things that have kind of been issues for Sam in his in this kind of doldrum of the season are going to be kind of ramped up to 11. And I just don't know if it just seems like Ron and the staff made the right decision to sit him down, given what had happened and then given what was going to happen in this game. And so, again, I hope he plays well, and I feel really terrible for Jacoby because I know he's been waiting all season for this opportunity. But it'll be, I think it's gonna be a tough day for Sam, kind of given all the adversity he's faced and kind of given where he was playing at, prior to this decision.
So a couple things. One, I guess we count Logan out on the conspiracy theory that Jacoby is like, you want to know what? I don't need to do this. Because if you think about it, he's about to be a free agent. He represents himself.
Right.
He right now has 5 real drives, and they have 5 touchdowns on those drives.
Right.
Pretty good resume. Or you can go get smoked by San Francisco because, by the way, your starting left tackle's out, your starting center's out, and we're waiting to hear on Andrew Wiley as the starting right tackle. So you might be behind 3 offensive linemen. If I'm Jacoby Brissett, I might have pulled my hamstring too. I'm just saying. No, a lot of people on the internet are saying, but Jacoby's so professional. I put the chances of him doing that at less than 1%, but not 0. I think more importantly, when you talk about Howell, in terms of this discussion that we're kind of having here, if you are saying start the kid, we got to see what he has, you are flying in the face of everything we know about human athletic development. It's just that's not how this works. There is nature, of course, but there is also nurture, and the idea that it is preordained that Sam Howell is going to be a insert quality quarterback here. 15 to 20, 20 to 30, backup caliber, or top 10, whatever you think he is going to be. The idea that he will get there no matter what, and it is preordained in some way, is not how any of this works. And I 100% agree with you, Logan, that when I look at him the last couple of weeks, this is someone who needs to reset. My hope, this is full optimism glasses on, is that he got that reset. That the computer was off long enough that we can turn it back on.
Right.
And even though there was no game that happened, which would have, I think, been helpful for Sam to watch Jacoby operate and see kind of what the real timing of this offense is supposed to look like in a game situation, that the pressure coming off of him is enough to reset.
That's what I thought. I was hoping to. But
and maybe that happens. Maybe he goes out today and he's like, you know what? Nobody believes in me anymore. Bleep the world. I'm going to let it rip. And that's enough to get him to that next level. Then he realizes, like, oh, this is how I should play? Cool. And that's kind of what happened a couple weeks ago for Zach Wilson of the Jets. He came back, and nobody really had any expectations for him, and he played his best game of the year. Unfortunately, he then reverted to Zach Wilson.
Yeah.
But maybe for Sam, that's enough today. And the fact that there's literally no expectations on him or them, considering the injuries, considering the opponent, considering everything, maybe that's enough to kind of release that pressure of that downward spiral he was on in those final 4 starts that he had.
Yeah, you hope so. And there's just not a lot of it'll just be – I'm just really curious to see how it kind of all plays out. And I think people who say, oh, he should play kind of no matter what, I think – I look at other sports, specifically more extreme sports like boxing and ultimate fighting, and there's a point where, like, you just can't fight all the time for training purposes. You can't fight because it messes you up mentally, it messes you up physically, and I just feel like we were at that spot with Sam where we need to do something different. And so, yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens today. Like I said, I think it's going to be a tough draw for him based on what he's been doing the past couple of weeks. But like you said, maybe it's enough to kind of reset the system. He comes out, plays loose. We see a guy that we saw versus Denver, versus New England, versus in the second half of Seattle. Like that's the guy that comes out and plays. And if that does happen, that's fantastic, because I think he really just needs one game of these last 2 to be definitive, like an excellent performance for him to kind of say, like, I'm actually not cooked. I'm actually the guy that deserves the opportunity to be the quarterback for next year, because I think that's really what we're talking about, right? Is like, is Sam the guy for next year? And I think that's why people want to see him play.
Or is he even an option?
Correct,
right?
yeah.
Okay, because it's going to obviously depend on the new coach, the new GM, what system they run, what they think of the draft class, all that kind of stuff. But is it like, are the options take a quarterback at 3, 4, 5, wherever they wind up, 2, 3, 4, 5, wherever they wind up, or can we wait till the second round? Like, do we have to go pursue a veteran?
What's the math?
Yeah. Like, is Sam Howell a viable option even in a competition, or is he on the roster backup at best?
Yeah, I mean, is he Jalen Hurts, I think, is the question. Like, we always that's a comparison we've made recently, just because it seems to have followed a similar career trajectory. And I think when you look at Jalen and what he did, is like his first year starting, there was some bad games in there, really rough stretches, but there was also enough where you said, hey, like we're going to accrue some draft capital, we're going to build the roster up some more. And is he the bridge guy? And I say bridge guy, but is he the guy next year? And if he plays well, he's the guy for 2025. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's a question, a legitimate question. It's a legitimate thing that I think is, despite his kind of rough stretch here, it's a legitimate opportunity to say, hey, like, we don't love the quarterbacks. 'Cause I think as much as people want to say we're anointing these 4 or 5 guys in the draft this year, I think history has shown that quarterbacks in the draft aren't always the main thing. So unless you love one of those guys, and they may not, let's have a bridge guy, let's draft a tackle, let's draft whatever, and use him as kind of that stepping stone to kind of launch the franchise with all this extra draft capital we'll have floating around. So, again, like, if he has a good game today, I think it really kind of puts a definitive stamp on that and says, hey, like, I deserve to be in the conversation against a really good defense, against a playoff caliber team. But outside of that, I think he's kind of made it tough for himself in terms of making the argument to be the guy next year. So.
Without question. Something that we're going to do in the offseason on Take Command. This is news to Logan, but I probably won't be surprising news. I want to take a deep dive, kind of like we did this week with the 49ers.
Yeah.
On the Ravens, on the Dolphins, on the Lions, on the teams that are at the very top of the league this year, the Cowboys even, and say, okay, how'd they build it? Because I do think once you look around, to your point, top of the draft quarterback doesn't have to be the way.
Right.
You have to eventually get that position right, and right is a relative term. Right might be building a system around a quarterback. Right might be, you draft Patrick Mahomes and he turns out to be the best guy we've ever seen do it. But even Mahomes was not a top 10 pick. Now, of course, Joe Burrow is. Some of the other up-and-comers are top guys. Trevor Lawrence obviously has had a down year, but we think that all in all, they probably got that right in Jacksonville long-term. But I think when you look at Mahomes, you look at Lamar, there are other options on the table here, and how you build out your roster matters a lot. And so it's a conversation that we're going to be having that for 4 months, but to do a deep dive into how each team did it, where they did spend high draft capital, where they did spend free agent money, where they may have made key trades, is something that we'll embark on as an off-season project on the Take Command podcast. Here on the Take Command pregame show, do a very miniature version of that next as we take a look at the San Francisco 49ers defense and how they have been built to be not just solid, but really, truly excellent at all three levels, and where if you're Eric Bieniemy, you can try to attack today with Sam Howell likely back at quarterback. We'll obviously keep you updated with the news from FedEx Field as well as Jacoby Brissett warms up. Does that hamstring magically feel better on a Sunday? We will let you know as we go here. It is the Take Command pregame show on 106.7 The Fan and the Team 980. It is a burgundy and gold game day. Command pregame show on a burgundy and gold game day. Craig Hoffman, Logan Paulsen with you. We are at Tap Sports Bar, MGM National Harbor, where they are getting things set up for the doors to open at 11 o'clock. Meanwhile, at FedEx Field, Logan, we just Zapruder film style broke down Jacoby Brissett's pregame workout, courtesy of the video that Nikki Javala has posted. Certainly seems to have a little hitch in his giddy up.
So is Nikki there right now?
Yeah, Nikki's out there. Man, when you're on the beat, you get there early.
Yeah, what a psycho. What is that, 3 hours before the game?
I used to get there at 10.
Really?
Yeah, I also, the thing is, I would have hits. So
I know, I understand if you got to do something, like.
You're just there that early for the sake of being there early.
Oh, my God.
You got to beat traffic, bro.
You're just watching the warm-up, just like, oh, my gosh, what we got
going on. Well, also,
you
get a chance. That's the chance as a beat reporter to, walk around, talk to people.
Field?
People are kind of chilled out that early. Yeah. So
yeah,
a guy comes out
early.
When
I do the preseason stuff, everyone's super chatty.
Yeah.
Because it's like game day. Everyone's like, it doesn't matter what we say.
Or pregame before everyone puts their pads on.
Yeah.
Anyone will pretty much talk.
So is that what they're all doing?
If you can flag someone down, be like, what's going on?
Are they on the field? They're not allowed on the field, are they? Are they really? So you go on the field before?
Yeah. Not like on the field. You have to be on the sideline. And
You're not out there. You're not out there running routes. I get it. But you're on the sideline.
I also can't walk into the middle of people running routes and be like, hey, how you feeling?
Like some of those like the Sunday night crew, they'll do that.
Yeah, if TV broadcasts, you can get out there.
They're big time, huh?
Yeah. They just walk out in the middle of the field. Hey, Ron, how's it going?
I know.
Probably the answer for Rivera's right now is not great, Bob. Or in this case, Adam. Adam Amin and Mark Schlereth on the call today. Had the chance to get brunch with Adam yesterday. Swell fella. Enjoy watching him on TV.
Oh, he's doing the game again?
Yeah.
Gosh, I feel like he's done all
He's done. This is like
that.
This cruise. Well, Stink had an extra one while Adam was on a different crew for baseball. I think this is Adam's third game of the year and Mark's fourth.
Jeez.
So yeah, they've had a lot of them. By the way, it'd be interesting to see. Speaking of the broadcast, more of the game time really next week with the Cowboys being gifted the win last night by the referees with that 2-point conversion snafu. They're still alive for the NFC East. If the Cowboys and Eagles are both alive next week for the NFC East, that game is the Commanders-Cowboys game as well as Giants-Eagles.
Yeah.
Probably a 4 o'clock game.
That's a wacky deal.
The Brad Allen, the referee, probably cost us a 1 o'clock show.
That's why you were so mad about it.
I was
like, man, why is Craig so upset about this?
1, I've been on the Lions bandwagon since Hard Knocks. 2, I picked them, and I would have.
Was that last year?
Yeah. It just took them 6 games to get going, but they've been pretty darn good since.
They have been pretty good.
And then I picked him in my picks against Anthony, and he had the Cowboys.
That's tough.
And then
did they cover? They must have covered.
They covered, but we do it straight up.
Yeah, I got you. Because we're not that detailed.
Yeah, no,
details matter.
The point is to win, Logan. The point is not to
cover.
So that's how we roll. Anyway, the point is the Niners are playing the Commanders today. That game's at 1 o'clock. We're talking about it here on a burgundy and gold game day. So the 49ers defense, it's really good, Logan.
Yeah.
It's exceptional. When you watch it, what is the thing? Was it personnel, detail, scheme? They do creative, innovative stuff. Why is it so damn good? And why has it been so good, really? I mean, it was good when Kyle inherited it.
Yeah.
They had a good defense back in the day under Harbaugh. They carried it through the next couple of coaches, some of the personnel, and then obviously they've been terrific since Kyle got there as head coach. He's an offensive guy, but this defense has been legit. Why is it so good?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you watch the film, there's certain things that I look for with defenses, and it's just how confident really the secondary and the linebackers are playing. Obviously, they're very talented across the defensive line, and that's that's an easy thing to observe. It's Nick Bosa wins a lot of one-on-ones, and he plays really hard. And Eric Armstead, when he's healthy, is a dominant player that can line up in multiple slots. Obviously, he's hurt today. And then Chase Young, kind of how he fleshes out that group. But Hargrave, they've got a lot of good pass rushers. Those guys, just the energy they play with is very high. I love, to my original point, the back end, the linebackers, just they know what they're doing to a T. It's we're in quarters, I get a dig, the safety's cutting, I'm rolling. And there's no air. There's not a lot of space in the coverage. When you watch Philly, for example, we talked about this earlier this year.
Yeah.
There's a lot of air in the back end of the defense, and guys are a little unsure. They're kind of in between. The communication's not great. The Jets defense, this defense, if we're in cover 2, if we're in Tampa 2, if we're in quarters, if we're in cover 3, everyone. It's like exactly how you draw it up, and guys are great with their eyes, they're great with their vision, and they've got a bunch of competitive athletes. And I think the scheme there is obviously elevates some of those guys. You know, some of them they're all good football players, but it elevates them even more, as opposed to like earlier this year when we were watching the Commanders, the scheme seemed to hurt our players. I feel like it helps them, and I think that's something that's really just fun to watch. And I think when you look at, again, Dallas, the Jets, Miami to a certain extent, this team, when they're so well coached and they're so on the same page, to me, that's the sign of an excellent defense. And to me, it's almost, I know statistically they're not ranked that high, but when I watch them, I feel like this is the best group we've seen probably.
Even better than New York last week.
I do, yeah.
Wow.
I think it's better than New York.
Wow, that's saying something.
And I think New York's excellent. Like, let me just
yeah.
I think New York's fantastic. I just think, and again, New York's awesome because they have two kind of elite corners. They can play a ton of man. They're a little bit more aggressive from like that kind of coverage standpoint. But when you look at this team, it's like they're running like zone stuff, and the way they match is just so high. And then you couple that with a pretty dynamic pass rush, and it's a dangerous group. And I think people think, oh, it's, you know, we'll talk about this before, but it's, you know, why are you so high in the defense? Like, they have this tremendous offense. I think Kyle, when he calls games, really leans on the defensive efficiency. So he kind of stresses the defense in the way he calls the game. And then as the game goes, obviously, like, the dynamics shift, the paradigm shifts. But, like, he's okay calling 3 consecutive runs because if you have to punt, he's okay. It's like the defense will get us the ball back. Yeah. So I think there is that confidence with this group and a kind of reliance on this group that we that I haven't seen that we haven't seen this season. You know, like when you look at Miami, for example, they're an offensive-driven team. The Jets are a defensive-driven team because their offense is terrible.
Their offense is like, what's a car? We don't know how to drive.
Right, but Dallas, great defense, but they're offensively driven. That whole defense is designed to be playing with a lead. You know, here this defense is kind of it's equal in some ways to what the offense is doing and in terms of how Kyle calls the game.
There's something, too, about the physicality the 49ers play with. I don't know what the record is this year, but there was this crazy stat last year that literally nobody won the week after they had faced the 49ers because it was such a slog and it was such a – I mean, that was the fact. The reason is likely it's like you feel terrible for a week. That game lingers with you.
And I was just listening to Daniel Jeremiah's podcast, and they were talking – you know, they're Daniel Jeremiah and Bucky Brooks, they're super connected, like they're former scouts. They were talking to some people about – like what makes the 49ers different, and the conclusion they came to is they practice like a bunch of maniacs. Like they go to these joint practice settings and they just outpace, outwork, out-tough the team. So it's part of that 49ers culture. They draft tough players, they build tough players, they have a tough standard, and that's offensively and defensively. And you can tell how iron sharpens iron there. So this is a you know, in terms of teams that I enjoy watching, this has got to be up near the top. Like I really enjoy watching the 49ers. I enjoy watching Detroit. Like there's a toughness and a mentality that they attack the game with on both sides of the ball that I think is just really high quality football, and that you don't see each and every week. So I got a lot of respect for this group, and I think, you know, we talked about Sam and what he's going to be doing. This is a tough matchup, tough draw for him.
Yeah, it's going to be really tough. So if you're Eric, like, how do you approach this then? Do you running the ball's tough on them, throwing the ball's tough on them.
Yeah.
If you want to do some risk management, you can't throw interceptions or take sacks if you run the football. That doesn't seem to be Eric's MO.
Yeah.
The quick stuff last week was not great.
Right.
Teams are starting to sit on it in a major way. What do you do?
So what I was thinking about it, and it's a blessing to do these previews of other teams and see kind of what they're doing, what they're effective at. And I was watching a lot of Brock Purdy this week, and the thing that stuck out to me with Brock Purdy, and I've told you this, is just his ability to make a play, like when he's got to. Like the window's not entirely there, just giving your guy an opportunity with the football. And I think like there are going to be some really tight windows. I got to watch a lot of Kirk Cousins this week too, playing the 49ers. And the ability to say, hey, like I trust my guy to attack this space that the concept has created and deliver the football. I think that's something I'm really harping on with Sam this week. Like right at the top of your drop, this is going to be covered, but look at the grass over here to the right. Let's get the ball in that space and trust Terry, trust Jahan, trust Curtis, trust Logan to get into that throwing window and make that play. So they might not be open now, but they will be open then because he's going to need a lot of that today. I also think, we kind of, the offensive line here is much maligned, but they are a tough group of dudes. You know, they got a very blue collar approach, and so I might lean on those guys. Like you've talked about rushing efficiency, and when you watch them, their ability to strain. Like I know Wiley may not play today, but there was a play last week against the Jets where the double team's not great on Quentin Williams. Cosme kind of slips down, and he's got a free run to Chris Rodriguez on the touchdown, actually. And he kind of does this like Houdini, kind of grabs the guy's inside hip, spins around, kind of gets in front of him, and just gives enough daylight. And that doesn't happen on every team. So I think like that, if that's your toughest group, like lean on them a little bit. I know we've talked about that ad nauseum this whole season. I don't think that's going to happen. But that's a group that's got a bunch of tough, competitive sons of guns. Like,
and by the way, one of whom is playing at an outstanding level.
Yeah, like
Sam Cosme has had a hell of a season.
Yeah, man. And people sleep on that. And it's funny because him and Wiley in the run game are excellent. Like they work so well together because they're kind of these, like they're 310 pounds or 6'6". They're more basketball player than offensive linemen. And in the run game, it's so awesome to see those guys work together. I wish they did it more, obviously. And then Gates, you know, he brings that kind of blue-collar, kind of no-nonsense mentality. And then Chris Paul and Sadiq, like they have their deficiencies as players, and specifically in pass protection, but they strain, man. And I think that's one thing about that group that I appreciate. You know, they get all this flack in the media, and rightfully so to a certain extent.
Like, I mean, the problem is they built a running offensive line because they wanted to be a running football team, and then they became the pass happiest team in the league. Like, they're actually not terrible at running the football, even though they don't even scheme it up very well.
And they're not even terrible in pass protection, but when you leverage them 45 times a game, like we've talked about, we were just retreading old ground at this point, but when you
welcome to week 17 in a lost season, bro.
Yeah, when you leverage them like that, you know, you're going to, like, I don't care who you are. Like, there's a reason that San Francisco's offensive line is not, like, person for person, very good. But when you're looking, because I do those reports for the pass rushers around the league. Yeah. When you come to San Francisco, you might get 5 to 7 true drop back passes in a game out of 50 plays. Yeah. Like, that is, talk about deleveraging a group, right? And like compare that to what Washington's been doing the past couple of weeks. Like, it's not even fair. Yes, correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean the percentages are the same. The raw numbers are going to be terrible.
Yeah.
And, well, welcome to the 2023 Washington Commanders season. When we get back, Kevin Sheehan joins us here on the Take Command pregame show. Take Command pregame show on a burgundy and gold game day. Craig Hoffman, Logan Paulsen with you and with us half an hour into the show. Every week, we got 2 more of these, Kevin Sheehan. How are you, sir?
Happy New Year, boys. Yep, just 2 more, thankfully. Although I've enjoyed this all year, and last year, too. So I'll miss you guys.
No, well, I mean,
it's a great time, obviously.
Yeah, we enjoy having you. We enjoy talking to you, but we can talk to you whenever. We have your phone number. We don't need to do this. This is ridiculous. What are we doing here?
I know. It's just something we've gotten used to too over the years. I mean, more years than not, a lot more years than not. Over the last 30 plus, it's been meaningless games at the end of the year, and that stinks for an NFL fan base because you watch last night, the game's a big game in the NFC with ramifications, and then there's controversy, and everybody's talking about it today, and you're in these games which literally mean nothing coming down the stretch, and it's been a lot of years like that. Maybe things will start to change after this one's over.
We can certainly hope. In the meantime, the quarterback story this week has been a wild roller coaster. The latest is that we're waiting for the official word that Jacoby Brissett will not play, and it certainly is trending that direction. What do you make of how this has gone this week?
Well, I mean, actually, I'm kind of glad if Sam gets the chance today. I'm not a big believer in kind of this lasting, irreparable psychological damage for competitors like I think he is. He's not been physically beaten up here recently. It's not like he's hobbling around or carrying his right arm in a sling. I mean, he's been hit much less recently in actuality because he's been bailing from the pocket so quickly. If this were a physical issue, it would be a different story. I've heard people, by the way, I don't know if you guys have talked about this at any point this week, but people have tried to make this analogous to the Patrick Ramsey situation 20 years ago. Logan, Steve Spurrier was the coach, and literally on every single play, he had the maximum number of eligible receivers on the field, which meant no more than 5 offensive linemen protecting Ramsey, and he took a battering. I don't think that's this situation. I just would like to see Sam today. Ron's reminded us all year long that this season was a lot about developing a young quarterback they believed had a chance. And to me, from the beginning of the week, the idea of letting him take a break or a breath, as Ron had said, was too much for me, about maybe their fading belief in Sam as the guy that they were hoping he could become, or at least look like at this point. And I think there was some frustration in there, too. They wanted to see something better. Remember this. For a month straight, they lost by 35, 30. And then against the Rams and Jets, they were on the verge of losing by 3 touchdowns or more. I mean, the level of attitude over 4 games, I'm sure, was frustrating for them. So they wanted to see something better, but I'd like to see Sam get a chance to fight through this on the field. I think we're going to see the offseason be about quarterback as a top priority anyway, but I'd like to see him get a chance to fight through it on the field.
I mean, it's interesting because, when you look at – and I'd like to get your thoughts on this. When you look at the last probably 4, maybe 5 games he's played, he hasn't looked very good. And, I think people keep calling for him to play out of it. How many opportunities does he need? How many opportunities would you like to see him get, or do you just want to see him play until he's through this storm? I guess would be my question.
Well, I mean, I just don't think that you are if you go into this, it couldn't get any worse at this point. If I really thought, or if they really thought physically he was at risk. And maybe he is, although we haven't seen that be an issue the last 2 weeks. But then again, the 49ers are a different animal altogether. If they're really concerned about him physically, that would be one thing. I don't know. To me, he's been a resilient, tough guy. He's a gamer. I don't think he's going to be irreparably harmed if he has another bad game against the 49ers. There's no upside in playing Jacoby Brissett. For us, anyway, maybe for them to feel a little bit better about being, a more competitive offense. I just don't see massive downside to playing Sam. I think we've gotten to the point where, more likely than not anyway, they're going to be in quarterback search mode, draft-wise and otherwise, when the offseason begins.
Counterpoint, Kevin, and counterpoint to someone that you are a huge fan of. How important do you think it was for Kirk to sit out? Because that's something that we talked about on the podcast this week, and Logan was obviously there for it. And Logan, said like, hey, at the time, like, yeah, he needed to sit and watch and learn some things, then go back out there and try again. And that's kind of where the two of us come down, is like this rest reset thing is actually a good thing for Sam, that there is some nurturing that needs to happen, and what he is going to depend on those development choices versus just he is what he is, and he'll play through it.
And I also just want to say, like, not all situations are created equal. Like, not all guys are created equal. So, like, we make this comparison to Kirk, and maybe Sam's a totally different guy. But, like, where do you lie on that, Kevin?
Well, I mean, I think the way you described it is fine. And I mean, if that's really what they believe, that's okay. I just don't like the idea that he's too fragile to go out and play these last two games. To me, that's very telling. And I also, the whole comparison with Kirk, to me, Kirk had real top half of the league starting quarterback potential. And it was a completely different situation, as you guys said. That season was still in play. I mean, that was earlier in the season. Just like Dwayne, when they benched him, it was earlier in the season. Different situation as well. We're talking about two meaningless games left. I'd rather see him, unless it's really too fragile of a situation. And to me, that would speak volumes too.
Well, I think the other thing that I just keep coming back to also is, like, obviously there's times where Sam's playing badly, but the offense is functioning. There's times, though, where I'm like, where is the receiving room at? Like, where is the tight end room at? Because I can't distill, when the ball should be out or how accurate this throw needs to be. And, I just think it's interesting that when Jacoby comes in there does seem to be a little bit more rhythm to the offense, which helps with the evaluation of some of these other pieces. And I know with this offseason coming up, new ownership coming in, a lot of personnel decisions are going to need to be made. Do you think there's any validity to that argument, or are you kind of okay with just saying we need to figure out what this quarterback thing is?
No, I do think there's validity to that argument. The only thing is organizationally, I don't know if I own the team, if I really care with two games. Understanding the value in losing these two games organizationally. Of course, it doesn't mean that the coaches or players understand that or would adhere to that. We all understand that as fans. But if it's really gotten to the point where you can't evaluate other players, that's an issue. We saw that with Robert. Saw that we've seen that with other quarterbacks here over the last 10 to 12 years. But it's not like there's a lot of season left. And who at this point are you really trying to evaluate? If you're talking about bringing up practice squad, by the way, should be the plan next week, including Jake Fromm. That should be a big part of the plan, even if Dallas has nothing, even if Dallas has something to play for, which now it appears they will. But you could still get Dallas resting starters in the second half next week if Philly's up by a bunch. You got to be careful with that situation. If you're evaluating those players, maybe you evaluate them with Jake Fromm. By the way, who's the backup today?
They signed Fromm to the 53. I double checked on that this morning. So yeah, Fromm is up and ready to go, and I assume he'll be active no matter what as the third quarterback even if Jacoby miraculously plays. But it'll probably be Howell, Fromm, and then Brissett inactive.
But let me just add to Logan's point. Like, if we've gotten to the point where you can't evaluate other players because Sam is so bad, and we have come to the conclusion, right, at this point, that quarterback's the number one roster offseason priority.
I think you can make that argument. I just think that, like...
So, I mean, I guess for me, like, the reason I brought it up is because there's times where I'm like, is Jahan a real 2 in the NFL? Or is he more of a 3? Like, did they miss on that pick, or did we overvalue Jahan's skill set last year? And I can't make that determination because of how the offense is progressing at the moment with Sam at the helm. Like, Terry, like, has he lost a step, or are we just having a difficult time with the quarterback spot, right? Curtis seems to be thriving in this new role. Logan seems to flash, but our two kind of number one receivers haven't kind of taken that step with that we all thought they would take. So I think that's more what I'm referring to. I understand you want to flesh out other areas of the roster, no doubt, but do we need to make a big move for a receiver? Do we need to bring in a Mike Evans? Do we need to kind of those are the things that I'm questioning at the moment. And again, like, is that fair of me? I don't think so, but it's so tightly correlated to what Sam's been doing the last couple of weeks.
I think, and then the other thing I would add to that is then the quarterback part of that is, like, if I'm Frank Smith or Ben Johnson or Bobby Slowick or insert new coach, have I seen enough high upside stuff from Sam that I look at the way they're using him and go, that is coaching malpractice. This kid's got something. I can develop it. I can incubate him. I can create a better ecosystem, and having the evaluation on the other parts of the ecosystem becomes really helpful if you can see what Jacoby could do with them. So, like, they're obviously intertwined to an extent, but I don't think they're completely in lockstep.
Yeah, that last point is something I've talked about this week as well. Is just if Sam had been in a more quarterback friendly for the offense, something that was more balanced, something where run game and pass offense with QB keepers and bootlegs and play action were a part of it. Because to me, I see a guy that would actually be pretty good in San Francisco's scheme, in Kevin Stefanski's scheme. Those kinds of schemes. But, it's still, at the end of the day, 3rd and 10, you need somebody to be able to sit in the pocket and let receivers get downfield and make a throw. And I think that's where we've seen the flaw, and whether or not it's fatal or not. If fatal is awfully aggressive and hyperbolic, but because he can play in this league, it's just whether or not he's a legitimate starter. And I don't know that you've got a guy on 3rd and 8, 3rd and 10 can deliver over and over again from the pocket.
Fair enough. If you want more from Kevin on all of this, the Kevin Sheehan Show, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. on the Team 980 weekdays, and then, of course, the Kevin Sheehan Show podcast as well. Kevin, thank you, sir, and we'll direct people to your podcast for all the picks and such.
You got it. Thanks, guys. Happy New Year.
Thanks,
Happy New Year to you as well. And if you do want Kevin's smell test and the rest of his picks, check out the podcast from his Friday show or the Kevin Sheehan Show podcast. When we get back here on the Take Command pregame show, let's finish out this conversation on quarterback to close out the hour, and then we'll hear from the Junkies coming up at the top of the hour on 106.7 The Fan and the Team 980. You'll hear from the Sports Junkies coming up at the top of the hour here on a Burgundy and Gold game day, 106.7 The Fan, the Team 980, streaming live on YouTube too, at the Team 980 and at 106.7 The Fan. We will be there post-game as well. The post-game live stream about 90 minutes after the final whistle. Logan, that's Logan Paulsen. I am Craig Hoffman here on the Take Him In pregame show. Let's kind of wrap up that conversation we've on some level been having for the hour, but that we had with Sheehan in terms of the evaluation of other players. Like when we talk about that, like how hard is it to say, and why is it so difficult the last couple of weeks to make an assessment on Jahan Dotson versus if Jacoby Brissett is in there?
Yeah, so I just go back. I mean, it's like literally like one play made me think of this, and I know that's like really hard to do, but it's just funny how something can change your perspective on the team and on a position, on a player. And it was the comeback that he threw versus the LA Rams. Jacoby threw it, and there wasn't a ton of separation, but because he threw it with great anticipation, I'm talking about Jacoby. Jahan was open. I'm like, Jahan has been open like that at a couple times this year. There's been a couple opportunities where Jahan's got a foot and a half of separation, and the DB recovers because it's later in the down. The quarterback's held the football, but I thought I want to see more of that. Like if Jacoby's in, like there was a play against the Jets where Jahan is on Sauce Gardner, runs like what I call a money route, so like an out, up, and then to a comeback, and has 3 yards of separation. And I thought, Sam's kind of waiting to see it come open, as opposed to Jacoby, who I think would be like, the receiver's putting his foot down, I'm throwing this football. So like that trust and understanding of the timing to help kind of maximize these guys that are really good at running routes, specifically Jahan Dotson. I'm curious to see if there is something to that, because everyone talks about receivers elevating the quarterback. It goes the other way. We don't talk about enough quarterback elevating receivers, and I think in this instance, I just wanted to know how a guy with more experience, with a more understanding of the timing, with more understanding of the rhythm of the offense, could potentially kind of wake up the production of some of these guys that we've been calling for more production from. So that's really kind of my thought.
When Jacoby's been in, Jahan all of a sudden becomes alive. Like he was targeted 3-4 times last week in that second half, and it feels like he never gets targeted when Sam's in the game. And it's weird because those guys had such a great rapport in training camp, and it just hasn't translated over to the season. I think Jahan's such an interesting case too. Not to get too sidetracked, but you sent me a clip from Move the Sticks, the podcast you were referencing earlier today, with Daniel Jeremiah and Bucky Brooks about what's the through line of great receivers in the NFL right now, and it seems like it's play strength and toughness. And when you watch Jahan, you're like, is that guy? And I don't know, but what does he do really well? He can route somebody up. He's got this kind of precision to his game that if you're not throwing guys off of you and playing with that physicality, that timing element becomes really important. And so for a receiver specifically like Jahan, the quarterback I think is going to be more important than it would for just a physical behemoth. Like A.J. Brown can play with anybody because he's a tank. Throwing to a tank is easier than throwing to whatever analogous inanimate object Jahan is.
I also don't think it's a coincidence that A.J. Brown was. Everyone's like, oh, is he a true number one? Is he the guy when he's in Tennessee? And he goes to an offense where the quarterback says, I trust you, I'm going to feature you. The offense is built around you. And he becomes the best receiver in the NFL for stretches of the season. And I'm not saying that lightly. Like, he's been very productive. But again, there's a scheme switch, a quarterback switch that elevated him in terms of his production. And Santana Moss talks about that all the time in terms of his career. Like, what would he have been like if he had a legitimate quarterback at any point in his career? And
he had 14 different guys try.
Yeah, and it's a scary thought to think about a guy who was uber productive in his time, could get open versus anybody. If he had a Tom Brady, if he had a Peyton Manning, if he had insert your top 10 quarterback here, like, he would have been devastating. And I think that's where I'm at with Jahan, is like, because we listened to that podcast, I sent it to you, about this physical toughness, and it's something that I undervalue. I value it at the receiver position. I like that, but I don't think it's the end-all, be-all. Because if you're a great separator, oftentimes you can overcome some of that stuff. And I think about, the Isaac Bruces of the world, a guy that wasn't overly physical necessarily. He wasn't super tough, but he played with a quarterback that was super accurate. He could create great separation, and they maximize each other. And so do you need, this is my question really, is do you need to say, oh, we need to go out and target one of these? Because this, I started a little bit of draft work, and basically there's like 10 receivers in this draft this year that are 6'4 plus, they're 215 pounds, they run 4.3s, and they're excellent at contesting catches. So, there's going to be an opportunity for you to find a guy like that to maximize your room, and that's not even talking about the free agent guys. So do you need to make that decision, or do you have someone in the building already that you feel good about and say, hey, we like the trajectory that he's on? And for me, I haven't been able to kind of come to a firm conclusion, because there's times this year with Jahan specifically where I'm like, man, I wish he was a little bit more competitive. I wish he was playing harder. And then I watched the Jets game, and I'm like, this dude is an NFL starting player, but we can't see him because the quarterback can't get him the football. And that's not all on Sam. The offensive line, the timing, all those different things are at play here, the play calling, whatever it is. But that's what I want to know. I want to know is, do you need to go make a move at tight end, or is Logan Thomas good enough? And I know fans don't want to hear that with Brock Bowers in the draft and all that stuff.
Sure.
But there's times where I see Logan Thomas make that play on the Skinner, like the post for the touchdown, where it's a contested catch. He gets his big body in there, and Sam doesn't make that throw. But Jacoby does, and now no one's saying, oh, Logan's not being productive enough. So that's kind of what I want to see. And if today's going to be a tough data point, I think, for everybody, but that's why I wanted to see Jacoby play today.
Yeah, for what it's worth, I think, with Curtis being a free agent, like, I'd probably move Terry down to 2, Jahan down to 3 in the slot, and I shouldn't say down to 2 for Terry. Like, still your primary guy, but he moves to Z instead of X, and you go get the big body guy. And we talked about that at length with reception perceptions. Matt Harmon a couple weeks ago on the podcast, definitely one worth checking out. If you missed it, just search Take Command in your favorite podcast feed. We get back here on the pregame show. You're from the Sports Junkies on 106.7 The Fan and the Team 980. Hour number 2 of the Take Command pregame show, live from Tap Sports Bar at MGM National Harbor, where the doors are open. You can come hang out with us. We'll be here up till kickoff. They got great specials all day long, every game on the TVs. So if you want to watch the NFL today, this is a great place to do it. And you can come hang out with us up until kickoff here at Tap Sports Bar, MGM National Harbor. Logan Paulsen there. I'm Craig Hoffman. We will dive into the tape a little bit more. Where has Sam Howell regressed? Coming up in about 10 minutes from right now, a little over 10 minutes. Right now, though, 11 a.m., it is time for you to hear from the Sports Junkies and their thoughts on today's game.
I don't envy the Commanders in this spot. The Commanders just want to get to the end of the season, get through these last 2 games. We know that the sand is going through the hourglass on Ron's tenure here. These are his last 2 games. A lot of these players won't be back. Look, they just want to have a respectable outing, and for the fans' sake, lose the game, but lose it respectably so you don't lose your draft position in the upcoming 2024 NFL draft. Obviously, the huge storyline, Jacoby Brissett in, Sam Howell benched, and let's be honest, it's for the last 2 games. It's not like Ron said during the week, oh, we're going to take it game by game. Sam's sitting for the rest of the season. It's the Jacoby Brissett show against this week the Niners and to close out the season with the Cowboys. And hopefully he's hot like he was in relief of Sam in the last 2 games.
Yeah, as long as Brissett stays healthy.
Right.
I would be a little concerned about the 49ers defensive line against a beleaguered and subpar Commanders offensive line. But the way I'm looking at this game is, how are the Commanders going to stop the Niners? The Niners offense this year, number 2 in the league in yardage. They put up 404 yards per game. They're number 2 in scoring at 29.6 points per game. They're going up against the worst defense in the league. We've seen it. It doesn't matter. We thought, oh, maybe they have a chance against the Jets, and turned out because Jacoby Brissett and the offense got hot, they did have a chance to win that game.
Right.
But in the end, the defense couldn't get a stop. If they got a stop on the last drive, they don't give up the game-winning field goal. They actually get a dub. This defense hasn't been able to stop any offense this year, let alone a prolific offense. Brock Purdy had an off game against the Ravens, threw 4 interceptions. But before that, that team was rolling. 6 wins in a row, and people thought they were an unstoppable force. They were humbled. I know they are a little nicked up, and they're coming over from the West Coast to the East Coast. I think they're going to put up 40-plus on the Commanders. There's no reason for me to bet on the Commanders' defense. Now, offensively, I do think that Brissett is an upgrade on what we've seen from Sam Howell clearly the last 5 weeks, where his quarterback rating through 5 games is roughly around 50, 2 touchdowns, right, 8 interceptions. The problem is, at the running back position, they're down some guys, so the depth is hurt there. I do like the fact that we've seen the receivers get in the mix with Jacoby Brissett.
Yeah, Jacoby Brissett is actively looking for Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson downfield. He's willing to push the ball downfield. He gets rid of the ball quickly. I just don't think he's going to be able to keep up with a Niners offense that, let's be honest, Kyle Shanahan wants it to get ramped up and looking like it was earlier in the season prior to the Ravens game, with the playoffs looming. So if they start scoring points, it's not like Kyle's going to, lift his foot off the gas pedal. He wants this offense to be ready for the postseason. This is a tune-up type of game, perfect game for them to rebound after that loss to the Ravens, after getting smacked around on their home field. By the way, the Niners, in 6 of 8 road games this year, have put up 30-plus points. So they'll score anywhere. It doesn't matter home or away. And, I think
30 seconds.
30-point plateau again today.
Vegas basically has them as a 2-touchdown favorite. I'm going to take the Niners 45-17.
Okay, so you have it, that's that is quite a margin there. I think it's going to be a little bit closer than that. I still think the 49ers cover the 13 or 13.5, whatever the point spread lands on pre-kickoff. I like the Niners 35-21 Commanders fall to 4-12 with another loss at FedEx. I would expect a big contingent of
Your back hot
stands as well.
Not a lot of optimism from the Sports Junkies. How can there be optimism? Back to you guys.
All right, guys, thank you very much. So, not a lot of optimism. They're in the morning show.
Wait, really?
I know, stunning. Don't forget to listen to Sports Junkies on the Fan and the Team 980 weekday mornings 6 to 10 a.m. Also live on the free Odyssey app. But Logan, as a player, when you go into a game where you're a big underdog, you're not looking at the spread, obviously. You're not like, oh, we're 13-point dogs. I'm sure you had coaches that sometimes
would be like,
bring it up. Like, no one believes in it. Vegas doesn't believe. But when you know, like, hey, they're a better football team than us. We're this late in the season. They're 11-4. We're 4-11. But we just got to beat them today. It's any given Sunday NFL style, right?
Uh-huh.
Like, how do you get your mind right for a game like that? And how important is a good start to make sure that belief doesn't quickly expire?
Yeah, I mean, I think the good start's absolutely critical because I mean, like you're kind of teetering on like being on vacation already.
Yeah.
So if it gets down, it's 21-0, 21-3, and it's not through the first quarter yet, it's really hard to stay motivated. Which is one of the reasons last week's game against the Jets was so impressive because it would have been super easy. Everyone just get out of here. But in a game like this, for me, it was always like I just focused on like my macro level, micro level, macro level. One of those words. Of
big picture, or little picture.
Little picture.
Micro.
My micro level of the game. Like, what is my matchup? What is my job? How do I do that to best of my ability? And I just kind of like you can't worry about, at least in my experience, like the wins, loss of the other team. It's like, how do I maximize what I'm doing in this moment? Because the other stuff is just out of your control. Like, it's because you can't control all, 21 other guys. They got to control their business. And so that's how I always handled these games. And I tried to not even look at the score. Like, there were games where I would look up and be like, oh, we're down by 10 or we're up by 7, whatever. Like, I just didn't know because, like, I was so dialed into this. And I found that to be the best way to handle these types of situations, like where it's really, David versus Goliath, lopsided kind of affair.
That ability to focus on each individual play is a rare one. It is absolutely the right thing to do.
It's so hard. I'm not saying that I did it all the time. It's hard, right? It's really hard to do, especially when it's.
But even when you're good, like that's the goal, right? Like, do you play every play as the same play?
Yeah.
Do you have the same intensity? Do you bring the same level of focus and execution to every single play? That is an ideal standard. The reality of doing it is so hard.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, too, we talk about the start. Like, last week we saw the start really derail Sam Howell when he did not get any help early, drops, receivers slipping, all of that. But
Special
if we zoom
teams
out,
struggling.
Yeah. God, the worst special teams performance I think I've ever seen was the first half last week. So when we look to go the other way, macro, big picture, on Sam Howell, what has gone wrong these last 4 weeks with him getting ready to likely start today? By the way, that official word should come down in about 20 minutes with the ins and the outs, the inactive list at 11:30. We'll bring it to you live here on the Take Command pregame show. But what has gone wrong on a macro level with Sam Howell these last 4 weeks compared to the excellent play that we saw from him earlier this season? Logan's watched the tape. We will go to the tail of it next. It is the Take Command pregame show on a burgundy and gold game day. show live on a burgundy and gold game day. I am Craig Hoffman. He is Logan Paulsen. And we have breaking news, Logan. Right as we went to break, Nikki Javala of the Washington Post reports that it will be Sam Howell today as expected for the last 48 hours or so. Jacoby Brissett is out with the hamstring injury. He will be inactive, listed as the designated third emergency quarterback. So I guess technically he could wind up out there. But Jake Fromm is the backup. I would imagine at that point, like, you don't risk if I'm Jacoby and like we're down to that and things have gone that sideways. I'm like, yeah, Logan can go take some snaps.
Dude, I mean, he can.
I'm not risking my hamstring.
That's the thing. The thing that stresses a quarterback hamstring the most is like the handoff from under gun. So it just would be all like gun runs, maybe a couple quick game. Be a little dicey.
Yeah.
A little dicey.
Yeah. So we know Sam Howell will start the game today. Of course, he started the last two and has not finished them. So if things go sideways today, I think one of the things that's being bantied about on Twitter is like, do you go to Jake Fromm if things go sideways with Sam again, or you just tell Sam, hey man, we're going to finish it out. I do think before we get to, and this kind of leads into what we're going to talk about here in our Tale of the Tape segment, like if I'm Eric Bieniemy, I can't let that happen. I can't let that happen to this kid. Like he's got, I mean, look, I've said this a million times, and I feel so dumb, and I feel so sports talk radio-y, but, like, I mean it. It's an honest take, and I think I'm right. He needs to run the freaking football today,
He's
man.
not going to do it. So stop saying it.
Why?
He's not going to do it. I mean, we've had, what is it? What week are we in? 15? 16?
17.
This is week 17?
Yeah, we only got to do this one more time, bro, after today.
17. I'm all messed up. But, yeah, it's not who he wants to be. It's not who he wants this team to be. I do think they've been more efficient. It'll be great to see B-Rob coming back today.
What this team is, though, is a 4-11 team. That starting quarterback hasn't finished the last two games.
I get you, but there are guys who have a vision of what they want the offense to look like and what they want the production to look like. And I think he's been very clear about what he wants it to look like. And there have been times this year where it's like, oh, they're running the ball a little bit more.
He can want all he wants. We have 15 games of
data. I know. And I think that what I will say, the other thing that's tough about the 49ers is they're very good at stopping the run. So you're going to run the ball, you're going to bang your head into a brick wall for 2 downs. It's 3rd and 10. You've really leveraged Sam in that situation. So I think you just got to find a way to stay ahead of the stick, stay efficient. And this is one thing, I don't know if we're going to talk about this in a minute, but like, can you find / manufacture 5 explosive plays in this game?
That would be nice.
That would be my question. Because I think when you look at the offensive production dip, I think it strongly correlates to when Sam stopped making a ton of big-time throws each and every game. And, Sam was elevating the offense with those big-time throws. Now, as a coordinator, can you elevate him with some easier opportunities down the field? So, it's going to be a big lift today because this defense is excellent. We already talked about that. And Sam's been struggling against defenses like this. And they're going to leverage him to the hilt. They're going to really put a ton of pressure on him. So, in terms of optimism about this game for Sam, I'm not super optimistic. I hope he goes out and lets it rip. And I think that's maybe part of what EB's got to do today is just say, hey, man, like, let's give our guys some opportunities. Let's throw the football down the field and don't be afraid to kind of be who you were early in the season.
So that's, of course, the question we're asking is kind of what has happened to Sam, especially these last 4 weeks where he has been the least effective that he's been all year. Are there throws that he made earlier in the year that are available and he's just not letting it go anymore? Or have defenses latched on and the offense hasn't evolved and adjusted? Like what happened to the big time throws and the fearlessness that he played with earlier in the season? Because I'll say this real quick, Logan. People talked about, oh, well, why didn't they bench him against Buffalo when they did the last 2 weeks? Like what happened? I think what happened is earlier in the season he continued to play through stuff. Like he didn't change. He showed a resilience that was unbelievable. He did not show that resilience the last couple of weeks, and so that's why I think benching him was the right move. And now, obviously, here we are.
Yeah, I definitely think there's something to that. I mean, that's probably, I would say, the exact same thing. There's been a difference in his play over the last couple of weeks. A guy that went from operating the offense efficiently early in the season, finding open throws, making those big-time throws. So big-time throws like a tight window, down-the-field type throw. He was doing that. And then over the last couple of weeks, there just hasn't been – that guy's gone, really, since the Dallas game. Since he threw that pick in the Dallas game, in the second half of that football game, like, that guy has not been around. Like, you look at the Miami game, everyone says, oh, he was pretty productive in that game. I know he had a pretty solid PFF score in that game. But I look at that and I say, all of his big explosive plays in that game came off schedule. And the on-schedule stuff that you saw early in the season has just kind of evaporated. And you cannot operate as a quarterback in the NFL totally off schedule. It just doesn't work. And I think that's something that I look at and I say he needs to get back to doing some stuff on schedule. And this game against the 49ers is going to test that ability. It's almost like taking, a really challenging test. Like they are going to make sure if you're not on time, you're going to throw the ball to the defense. The window's going to be gone. So I think that's what I'd like to see today. It's like all the stuff he's done poorly for the last 4 or 5 weeks needs to totally flip on its head, and he needs to start executing at a higher level in the timing and rhythm of the offense. And again, the windows are small. The opportunities are even smaller. There's not a ton of separation. Defenses are matching these concepts much better, but you got to make plays. And it's like we talked about, like with Brock Purdy. And I think this is a really good comp because they're both lower round draft pick guys with some ability.
Same draft, by the way.
Brock Purdy Kyle does a good job manufacturing big-time throws for him. And then there are probably 3 to 4 plays in a game where Brock Purdy elevates the offense. This offense has been completely kind of flipped to that. It's Sam Howell kind of leveraged in these big-time throw situations. And then when that has regressed, the offense has regressed with it. So I think that's what, if I had to distill it down to one point, be on time, be in rhythm. The windows are smaller. We're well aware of that. But versus smaller windows, those first 2 things have to be prioritized even more.
So I just pulled up some numbers for the arguments here. Pro Football Focus is what we're using for these because, well, big-time throws is their metric. So big-time throws earlier in the season. He didn't have any against Arizona, and then he goes 2 against Denver, 2 against Buffalo, 2 against Philly, 3 against Chicago, 2, 3, 3, 5, 2 against Seattle.
He was leading the NFL after Week 10 in big-time throws.
Against New England, by the way, 11% of his throws were big-time throws. Typically, it's somewhere between 4 and 7%. Then he had none against the Giants, none against the Cowboys, 1 against Miami, 3 actually against the Rams.
I don't remember any of those against the Rams.
I don't either, to be honest. And then he had 0 last week against the Jets. So
pretty precipitous drop-off.
Yeah, and meanwhile, Brock Purdy, every week, 2, 2, 3, 1, 3, 3, 2, 3, 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1. So he, they find the throws, and I can think in the Baltimore game, they only have him as 1. I can think of a couple throws that I consider big-time throws in that game. So, again, that's Pro Football Focus's metric, but, if you watch the tape, and that might be because, the throw that I'm thinking of is an 18-yard out route, and it needs to be 20 for it to hit their metric. But, that's a game where obviously, they also hilariously had Purdy with 2 turnover-worthy plays in a game where he had 4 picks.
Right. But they, I think that's another thing to speak to Brock Purdy is 3 of those were tipped, badly tipped, and that the receiver should have caught them. So
yeah. So all in all, the ability to keep the turnover-worthy plays down, to make the big-time throws is something that Sam, when he was good this year, generally did a good job of.
And function in the offense. I think that's the other thing. Big-time throws is huge because that was a big driver for the offensive success.
But really hitting the layups is more important than the big-time throws.
Yes, keeping the offense on rhythm and throwing in the timing of the play. Don't double-clutch something. Don't vacate clean pockets. Don't try to extend when there's opportunities there. And, again, it's really hard for me to look at the evaluation of last week's game because early on he's vacating clean pockets because guys are falling down, they're tripping up. Probably the first 6 or 7 plays is like that. But you got to find a way to be in the rhythm of the offense. That is going to be so, so important for the last 2 games if you are starting. What is the rhythm of the offense? Can I be in that rhythm? And can I sustain drives? And then when those big-time opportunities come, can I make some of those throws?
Yeah. I would just have him hand the ball off for a couple of drives, but I'm not Eric Bieniemy in so many ways.
Yeah, but we've talked about it before too, though. If running the football efficiently is a way to insulate the quarterback, but can you do that efficiently for, 5 consecutive carries or whatever that is, right?
Sure.
So you have to kind of that's why it's hard to be a play caller.
Yeah.
You got to run
I'm
the
not
ball,
saying it work. I just know he's not going to.
Keepers. Yep.
I'm not going to give him a chance to have a confidence-busting play early.
Right.
It's a bit of a bit, but also can you make sure? And to EB's credit, last week he starts off with 2 really easy
screens
throws.
Yeah.
A screen to Curtis where Curtis slips, Curtis drops it.
Oh, RPO,
and then the RPO. And then the hey, get him out of the pocket, get him on the move. Okay, roll to your left, doink off of his
Logan
helmet,
Thomas,
and then that gets picked off. So EB tried last week, it just didn't work. Results not guaranteed. When we get back, we will look at the result from last night. What a wild game in Dallas. Logan and I will give our takes on that, and then of course we'll go around to the rest of the NFL, take a look at the days full of games awaiting us today beyond what's happening at FedEx Field. We'll get the official and active report as well. It's the Take Command pregame show on a Burgundy and Gold game day. show on a burgundy and gold game day. I am Craig Hoffman. He is Logan Paulsen. And at 11:30, we go around the NFL. We'll keep you updated, of course, on the breaking news as well as it comes through. But we do know, as we wait for the rest of the enact, is that Jacoby Brissett will be the third quarterback today after being named the starter earlier this week. The hamstring injury suffered in practice Thursday keeps him out. Sam Howell to start. Jake Fromm is your number 2 today for the Commanders. As for the rest of the league, Logan, let's start last night in what it was just a fantastic game between the Lions and the Cowboys. Cowboys ultimately win 20-19. After the Lions score a late touchdown, we're going for 2.
Yep.
Respect for Dan Campbell. He is who he is. He listens to the analytics, at which a lot of coaches will lean into it sometimes.
Yeah,
but they tell you to go more often than I think people realize. And,
right.
and he's like, no, we're going.
Yeah.
Going for 2 in that situation, absolutely the right move. His team is ready. They had a play picked out. They told the refs before the game, hey, this is what's going to happen. And then it gets wiped off the board after they convert it because the referee called the wrong tackle eligible.
It's wild, man.
And it's so
disappointing.
Man.
It's disappointing when all that preparation goes into the game and then you seemingly do everything correct and the ref is not on the same page and the guy that drastically impacts the game.
I don't know what I think the thing that's frustrating for me if I'm Dan Campbell and why I don't know, I probably would have gotten thrown out of the game last night. I'm a terror when I feel like I've been wronged, which really lends great to my future coaching career and my relationship with referees. Anyway, the point is, you told the refs before the game this is what's going to happen. You talk to them during, you do all the proper stuff. What more did you want them to do?
No,
I think that's the thing that for the NFL they're going to have to answer for today.
Yeah, I think 100% right. I mean, that's the thing that I come back to is you literally did everything you're supposed to do. There's times where the guy didn't report or the guy wasn't clear to the ref or the guy didn't go up to the ref, whatever it was. But in this one, it sounds like everyone did exactly what they were supposed to do, it progressed exactly as it should have. The coach did what he was supposed to do before the game. The only person who didn't do what they were supposed to do is the guy that calls the penalty. Yeah,
and I think the one thing that really is tough about this is Brad Allen, the referee, calls the wrong guy eligible over the mic.
Yeah. At
that point, is it on the Lions to be like, no. But at that point, you probably also ruin the surprise.
Right.
Being like, oh, no. 68's the one that's eligible.
Right.
Not 70. Man, that was
tough.
Terrible. The hope, I think, is that winds up affecting nothing. If the Eagles win out, they win the division. They would be the 1 seed, probably, I think, depending on how the tiebreakers go.
Yeah.
But the Lions probably still the 3 seed behind San Francisco and Philadelphia. So hopefully, and obviously clinch the division. Hopefully it winds up affecting nothing.
Right.
And there's still a chance that could happen. The worst case scenario is if it costs the Lions the bye and the number 1 seed or home field or something, something wacky happens one of these final 2 games with Philadelphia or San Francisco ahead of them. And obviously if Dallas winds up jumping them ahead of Philly in the NFC East, if I was the Lions, I'd be
pissed.
Livid.
Yeah.
Livid.
Rightfully so.
And they are. So not gonna do a whole lot of good for them. Meanwhile, another good win for the Cowboys. And I do think even bigger picture, those are 2 very good teams, 2 legitimate contenders. We do our NFL tiers on the Hoffman Show during the week, and we've put them both in the prime contenders, our top category, and I think they prove they belong.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's just fun watching good football, fun watching teams that are well coached, physical and tough, and they've got playmakers. And I always enjoy games where playmakers come and step up in the big moments, like CeeDee Lamb with that over 200-yard performance. I think 14 catches, awesome.
He was
to see
awesome.
that.
And Amon-Ra St. Brown was great.
Right.
Montgomery was really good for Detroit. So a lot of Aiden Hutchinson. On the defensive side, Michael Parsons, both excellent. So just shows you what elite talent can do. It would be cool if they could acquire some in Washington. Patriots and Bills. Bills 14.5-point favorites over New England today. Obviously, this game very much matters for Washington in terms of draft position,
Right.
although more likely the one next week is the one we got our eyes on. Patriots-Jets to finish it out. Patriots win. The Commanders should stay ahead of them. And the draft currently, Washington holds the 3rd overall pick, and the Patriots hold the 4th.
Yeah, and in this game, I think it's one of those games because it's in the division where, the Patriots beat the Bills earlier this season. And the Bills, for whatever reason, they go on these spells where they just are spastically turning the football over. And so can they avoid doing that? Can they win this game? Can they continue to kind of push for that playoff appearance? Hopefully, yes, because I do think they deserve to be in the playoffs. I think they're a playoff caliber roster. But you never know with the Bills. And so that 14 points for me seems a little bit high just because of what they did earlier this season. But
I could see you're like they're just ticked off and they
so then they win by 20, and I would not be surprised by that at all. But I guess what I'm saying is people say, they should smoke the Patriots, but they should have smoked a bunch of teams this year, and they haven't delivered. So.
Yeah, they've been better as of late, though, as they get some of their guys back, Micah Hyde, et cetera, for Buffalo, especially on the defensive side. I think the big question for me today is, can Stephon Diggs get going? He has been very quiet the last 9 or 10 weeks, and if they want to do what they want to do in the playoffs, I think that
he needs to be there for sure.
That would be very, very helpful. Falcons and Bears, low-key, one of my favorite games of the day, just from terms of pure interestingness.
Yes.
Report comes out yesterday that Matt Eberflus is probably safe, which I think is phenomenal for the Commanders. That is one less open job that they're going to have to compete for candidates for, and it's the most similar job to Washington, where you kind of have that blank slate, top 5 draft pick, tons of cap space, etc. But they played really well since the Montez Sweat trade. Montez Sweat has been incredible for them.
Flip the team. It's crazy to say, but flip that whole defense. They were terrible. And now they've been playing like a top 5 group since he arrived.
Yep. And so Flus looks like he's going to keep his job. Obviously, we'll see with Justin Fields what they do. And, the number one landing spot, I think, for him this offseason in terms of trade, best fit would be the Atlanta Falcons, who look obviously better with Taylor Heineke than they do with Desmond Ridder. And it's very clear they've got to figure out their quarterback of the future. Question is, for them, is it going to be Arthur Smith deciding, or do they make a somewhat unexpected move and move on from him in the offseason?
Yeah, I mean, there has been noise about him getting fired this season. And there are times where you're like, man, just because there's so many good offensive playmakers there on that roster, you think they'd be more productive. But yeah, I do think if I'm Justin Fields and I'm his agent, I'm like, hey man, if Atlanta offers a trade, I definitely think that's a good opportunity. But I always enjoy watching the Falcons. Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Bijan, great group of guys there. Defense that's playing well. The Bears are fun to watch too with DJ. They just got guys that are fun and exciting to watch. Is the football always the best? No. The Bears, a couple weeks ago we were watching them and it was just here's the splash play by Fields. This is a great catch by Moore. And then there's 3 quarters of kind of quiet. For kind of a rapid push.
And then there's another drive, and you're like, oh, they're back. And then Fields throws a terrible interception to the wrong team in the end zone.
So it's not always great football, but I do think those teams are both compelling.
Raiders and Colts.
Raiders are 7-8, huh?
Raiders are 7-8.
That's
and
crazy.
By the way, speaking of top 5 defenses recently, they have played like a top 5 unit since Antonio Pierce took over. Max Crosby might actually be out of his mind, but he's certainly playing like it.
Yeah.
They have been phenomenal, and they're coming off a game that they really stole from Kansas City with 2 defensive touchdowns in about 9 seconds.
Yeah.
They didn't complete a pass after the first quarter, and they won.
Yeah, I know, and I think it's great. It's great for Pierce that he's getting those guys playing well, and it seems like he might be getting the job. I was talking to Fred Smoot, and apparently. And, we got to take everything that Fred Smoot with a grain of salt.
He is Fred Smoot,
but,
mouth of the South,
but it
never stops running.
But it sounds like that they still owe a lot of money to John and then McDaniels in terms of contract money. So, it might behoove them to have a coach like Pierce kind of hold the fort down for a couple of years, especially if he's got him playing well. And the Colts, man, I thought the Colts were a team that was going to make a push here late in the season. But they lost
disappointing
They lost last week. And, again, a group that I really enjoy watching. I think Pittman's excellent. I think they've got a nice, solid offensive line. They've got good running backs. It's just about can they find that consistency, which, again, kind of goes back to the quarterback spot. So
you're not going to be consistent if Gardner Minshew's your quarterback.
Right.
That's the nature of it.
Right.
But Pittman helps a lot. He was out last week. He's back today.
Yes.
Zach Moss continues to stay out, but Jonathan Taylor is back. And on the Vegas side of things with Pierce, I do wonder, you can't make decisions this way, but you should let your experiences inform you. They had Bisaccia a couple years ago after they fired Gruden.
Yeah.
He was really good. They were like, nah, this is interim thing. We're not going to do it.
Right.
They moved on. They hire McDaniel, and it goes belly up because Josh McDaniels is a terrible NFL head coach. Was fine offensive coordinator, terrible as an NFL head coach. And so I do wonder if they're like, we got an interim that's winning games. We screwed this up last time. Let's keep this guy this time. And I don't think it would be a terrible move. I think Antonio Pierce has done a phenomenal job. And I would, if I was him, I'd keep a lot of the same pieces in place and, just try to invest in that quarterback position. But guys seem to love him. And, getting guys to play hard
that's a big deal.
Is a big deal in the NFL.
Deal.
Rams and Giants. Giants back to Tyrod Taylor again. The Tommy DeVito experience
is over.
Is over. It's capiche. Rams, meanwhile, been playing obviously really well. Outside of that one dip in the middle of the season when Stafford was out, they're 8-7 on the road in East Rutherford today.
Yeah, I think the Rams are just a really compelling team. They're playing like a playoff caliber team with a roster that is not great, and I think the way they've built that team is so interesting because they've found these huge cornerstone pieces for their offense, 5th round running back, 5th round wide receiver, obviously later in the draft. And I think it just shows you that there's a lot of stock placed on these high draft picks. Just talking from a Commander's perspective now, but if you handle the talent evaluation correctly and say, how do these guys fit our scheme? Do they have the toughness, the competitiveness? Are they going to continue to get better? You can make that work. And I think, again, it's been really interesting to watch the Giants over the last couple of weeks kind of find an offensive identity with kind of a mishmash of quarterback pieces, and I think getting Tyrod Taylor in there is going to be great for them because he's been the most efficient quarterback they've had this entire season.
No, and he'll hit some big plays too. He's not afraid to chuck it, which always that adds that level of variance to the game. Giants 5-10 on the year. They're actually 3-3 at home. And by the way, 4 catches is all Puka Nacua needs to get to 100 on the season. Needs 173 yards to get to 1,500 on the season, which is not out of the realm of possibility for him today, but certainly seems feasible over the next 2 weeks. Cardinals, Eagles. Cardinals slowly 3-12. Obviously, huge eye on this for the Commanders. If somehow the Cardinals can pull an upset today, that would move the Commanders potentially into the number 2 draft position. Eagles, meanwhile, trying to stay as the number 1 seed in the NFC. They are 13-point favorites at home as they welcome their former defensive coordinator Jonathan Gannon back to town.
Yeah, and I think obviously the Eagles have been in a little bit of a lull. This is a game maybe you kind of get yourself back on track from an offensive identity standpoint, start greasing the wheels going into the playoffs. Can guys kind of get themselves together? But the thing that if I was watching this game, I would be really excited to see is can Kyler Murray elevate the way that you expect a former first-round pick to elevate, and a guy that's been paid a lot of money. And I think every time I turn that film on for them, I'm always like, oh, this is a great play, but can we find that consistency? Because if he can be that guy, and they can kind of say, we're going to take Marvin Harrison Jr., we're going to take Joe Alt, we're going to take Fashanu early in the draft, and start building this roster out, I think that's pretty compelling.
For sure. When we get back, a look at the back half of the NFL slate, including Dolphins and Ravens in the game of the day. That's next on the Take Command pregame show on a Burgundy and Gold game day. actives for the Commanders at the top of the hour on the Take Command pregame show. Craig Hoffman, Logan Paulsen with you. Finishing up going around the NFL, and let's go ahead and, Logan, and look at the game of the day. Just up I-95 from here in Tap Sports Bar at MGM National Harbor. We actually have to go 395 to 95, or 395 to 495.
I don't care about the roads, man.
It's in Baltimore. Ravens and Dolphins today. Kyle Hamilton is out for Baltimore, coming off of his 2-interception game. Brandon Stevens, one of their other starting corners, is out as well. Actually, one of their starting corners is out as well. Now, on the other side, Jalen Waddle is out for Miami, but this should be an absolute banger in Baltimore.
Yeah, I mean, I think after watching what Baltimore did last week against kind of the father of this Miami offense, it'd be interesting to see if anything's transferable there, like what works versus them. And also I think it's good for Miami because now they got a ton of beta about the plan and how to attack the structures that they're going to present. So I think defensively it'll be awesome. I think Lamar, the way he played last week, the way he's played all season, really, like, can he continue to elevate that group will be super compelling because he is so – when he is on, it's hard to imagine there's a better guy. Like, just his ability to extend plays, kill you with his feet. He's become so accurate as a passer. The run game that they developed, the offensive line they have in Baltimore, it's just like a really well-constructed organizational team, offense, defense, special teams. And then Miami's kind of trying to get there from a roster standpoint. I think there's still some holes, in their roster, but they're an excellent football team. They're one of the most explosive teams in the NFL. I think Raheem Mostert's also out in this game.
Yeah, Mostert is out in this game, so you're down to A-Chain, and Jeff Wilson, okay, you got two good backs, but Mostert has 20 touchdowns on the season. There's a reason he has his role. He's excellent. So it'll be interesting. I do wonder the schematic side of it, like you said, who benefits more? The Ravens having already played against such a similar offense now 2 weeks in a row, getting that continuity, or is it Miami who can look at what they did against San Francisco and be like, okay, we see what you're doing. Yeah. We now have a counterpunch.
And I think the other thing is one of the things when you watch that Baltimore game is they brought a ton of pressure, and traditionally teams have not been super successful pressuring Tua because he gets the ball out of his hands so quick. So maybe you take a different approach this week and say, this is what we did versus the 49ers because they like to run some of those longer developing play-action pass concepts, and then this week we're going to do something a little bit different. So we'll see.
Going to be really fun to watch. That one is a 1 o'clock kick in Baltimore. Saints and Buccaneers. This one basically for the NFC South. Atlanta still got something they can say about it. But Buccaneers win this one, and they are in the gigantic-sized driver's seat. Baker Mayfield
balling.
If he can get, let's see, what are we at? 35-98. That means he needs 402 yards in the final two games to have a 4,000-yard passing season. Not bad for a guy who's cooked, huh?
And I think the other thing is 26 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, or 8 interceptions, whatever it is. That's incredible. And I think a big part of that is Mike Evans and just how consistent Mike Evans has been over his career. What is this, year 10 for Mike Evans?
Yep.
9 consecutive over 1,000-yard seasons.
It's crazy.
It's awesome.
Having a big dude to throw to must be real nice.
And he's big and he's fast and he's super competitive, and I really enjoy watching him play.
Smart,
I've always
tough.
enjoyed watching him play. The thing there that's been a little disappointing is their defense. Obviously, with Bowles kind of heading that helm, it's been tough. But I do think that this will be a fun game just because it's for the division. So.
Dave Canales, their offensive coordinator, is actually a name to watch, I think, for offseason. And I do wonder, the Bucs did this a couple years ago. They let go of Lovie Smith for Dirk Cutter because they were like, we can't lose the offensive coordinator. It totally backfired. It's a terrible decision. Not terrible, but it didn't work out. Do they do the same thing again where they might move on from Bowles to keep Canales if they think that he's the better coach as their OC? Panthers, Jags. This is down to 3.5. Carolina's a 3.5-point dog on the road because Trevor Lawrence is out, and the Jags have been playing like
terrible. Yeah, I think that's the story is why are the Jags playing so badly? Trevor Lawrence is out for sure.
AC joint sprain.
I think it's C.J. Beathard, who I played with in San Fran. Fine player, but again, that offense I heard the best thing I heard is they don't make anything easy offensively, and everything's been very, very challenging for them. And if Trevor Lawrence isn't elevating that group, they've been struggling. The Panthers found a little something maybe.
Yeah.
We'll see. I don't know, but I think it's just this is more of how bad the Jags have been playing as opposed to how well the Panthers have been playing.
Yeah, Jags have lost 4 straight.
Yeah, not great,
Bad.
Coach. Not
Bad.
great.
The Panthers have won games more recently than the Jacksonville Jaguars. We did Dolphins, Ravens, Titans, and Texans. C.J. Stroud is back today.
Oh, nice. That'll be fun to watch. And again, like they are in contention for the playoffs, right? The Texans.
Yeah.
And year one of D'Amico Ryan's pretty compelling. And what's his name? Will Levis. Is he playing? Because that's what I care about.
I don't think so.
Oh,
but
that's a
I will
bummer.
check.
Yeah,
real
we got to
quick.
check that real quick because I think if that.
No, he looks like he's good.
So if those guys are playing today, I am watching that game. Because Will Levis, you never know what that dude's going to do. Is he going to try and truck a defensive tackle? Is he going to throw an 80-yard bomb? Who knows?
Yeah.
And then C.J. Stroud's playing good football, so let's check it out.
Yeah. Who knows what Levis will do? And C.J. Stroud is good. Steelers and Seahawks. It's actually a light 4 o'clock window today, which is unfortunate because there's so many good games in that 1 o'clock window. You just wish they'd move a couple of them to 4. Steelers, Seahawks. Seattle 4.5-point favorites at home. Steelers without Minkah Fitzpatrick again. Who knows what to make of them, man? Every time you start to believe they lose, every time you're like, all right, they're finally cooked. Mike Tomlin wins a football game.
Yeah, and I mean, I enjoy watching Seattle. I think they're doing a lot of interesting offensive stuff, innovative offensive stuff. Shane Waldron, I guess, could be in the head coaching circuit
He
here
definitely
in a little
will
bit. So want to keep an eye on. But yeah, the Mike Tomlin thing is baffling because like they look so good for probably the first 8 games of the season. They hit a little bit of a dull. They're back at it. Who they're going to be? Who's their quarterback? Can they play offensive football? Who knows?
Mason Rudolph is their quarterback today.
Right.
One of the 2 final games, if they win it, they will be over 500, which will be all 16, I think it is, years of Mike Tomlin's tenure. Chargers-Broncos doesn't deserve to be talked about, so we're not going to talk about it. We should. The Russell Wilson thing is maybe
That's
a podcast episode.
Bit, yeah.
That's Chiefs, Bengals. KC favored by 7, even though they totally could not operate last week.
Can they figure their lives out? Is the thing with Kansas City. Like it's been crazy to watch the drastic shift in offensive production, and maybe the receivers are regressing. Maybe that's to be expected. We don't have like kind of that elite number 1, but can you kind of show, hey, we deserve to be the team that won the Super Bowl last year again, like kind of going to the playoffs with that kind of respect around our organization and our name. So, yeah.
I think people will respect them because Mahomes is terrifying and their defense is legit top 5 good.
Their defense is playing really well.
The offense has to help them out. And for the first time I can ever remember watching the Chiefs last week, I was like, Mahomes is part of the problem right now. He seems a little scattered. And so can they get that fixed, get that right back on track? And then last but not least, tonight, there's no Monday Nighter this week because the college football playoff tomorrow. Obviously, the Monday Nighter, if you will, was last night. Packers and Vikings finishes it up on Sunday Night Football. Minnesota is a 1-point favorite at home with Jaren Hall starting.
It's unbelievable, like the sequence of their quarterbacks, right? It was Dobbs, Mullins, and now we're at Hall again, who got hurt when Dobbs ended up getting the start that one time. So the Packers are always fun to watch, I think. If they can even play a little bit of defensive football, they're compelling. They're just a really talented team. And they're on offense, they're obviously very young. Defensively, there's names all across the board. I just feel like they should be playing better than 7 and 8, and they're playing a division rival. And Minnesota just is like the inverse. Like there's a lot of holes in that roster. The defensive coordinator there, his name
Brian
is
Flores,
has totally elevated that group with this kind of high blitzing percentage and more drop 8 than anybody in the league. So they're blitzing more and they're dropping more in coverage than anybody else in the league. So crazy there, but elevated that group, and it shows you how important coaching is, specifically a defensive coordinator.
For sure, and 24 teams are still alive for the playoffs. That is the most in about 30 years that the NFL has been tracking that. So in terms of 2 weeks left in the season, obviously it used to be week 16, now week 17, but a lot of teams could see their playoff lives end today. Should be a fun day across the league. We'll see how fun the day is in Landover. We will get you the final and active list next. It's not pretty for the Commanders. How do they overcome it? Commanders 49ers preview. One more hour of it here on the Take Command pregame show on a Burgundy and Gold game day. Take Command pregame show. We only got 4 hours left of pregame shows, Logan, this season.
I'm sad, but,
Considering the season,
correct.
I'm not that sad.
Yeah. I'm sad that we don't get to hang out as much.
Yeah, I mean, we do a podcast.
I know.
We spend a lot of time.
I actually, in the week, talk to you way more than I probably should.
Should?
Yeah, probably.
That's harsh.
I mean, we talk, I talk to you more consistently than, some of my best friends.
Yeah.
Like you do too.
That's true.
Here's a guy that I work with that I talk to for how many hours a week? 7 hours a week?
Well, currently with the pregame,
Yes.
yeah, no, it's 7. It's 7 for sure. That's just in the microphones, and then we wind up talking off air.
That's right.
Logan and I are actually friends.
No, yeah.
But we're not like best friends.
Yeah,
but we
that
definitely
sounded
talk
weird,
a lot.
But I sometimes in the week, when I talk to you more than I talk to my wife sometimes. In the course of the whole week, because there's dedicated time. It's just crazy, how much we talk.
Yeah.
And it's about the Commanders almost exclusively, which is also kind of wacky.
Yeah. What if we just did a podcast where we just talk about other stuff?
I think
just
we
talked
should
about
do
our
that.
lives.
I kind of want to do that this week.
The Craig and Logan non-commanders take command podcast. Take zero command. That's
Shaq,
what
you
we'll
like
call
that?
that episode.
That'd be a good one.
Anyway, we're going to talk about this game now for another hour, and then the game is going to happen, and we're gonna talk about it on a post-game show.
Yeah, that's right.
On YouTube, you can stream it live, or of course subscribe.
More Commanders content.
Yeah, Take Command podcast. It will be out tomorrow morning in your audio feed. All right, the inactive list, which also couples as the injury report, brought to you by CFA Ortho. Jacoby Brissett is out. He is the emergency third quarterback, meaning technically he can play today if the other two quarterbacks were to get hurt. Yes, he will dress. Although, I mean, if that hamstring's bad enough, maybe he won't. But I don't know why they designate him otherwise. I guess they have to. But then we haven't even talked about the fact that the top 3 of the 4 defensive starters in the defensive backfield are out today. Benjamin St. Juste and Kendall Fuller are on the list here of inactives. Percy Butler has actually been moved to injured reserve. So we'll talk about what that all goes to in just a moment. Jalen Harris, defensive end, who's been playing a decent amount, is a healthy scratch. And then Andrew Wiley is out. Charles Leno and Tyler Larson moved to IR. Cole Turner is out. Mitchell Tinsley remains inactive today. On the Niners side of it, Juwan Jennings, wide receiver. Brandon Allen is their emergency third quarterback. Jair Brown, safety, who's been playing well for them, is out. Jalen Graham, Jalen Moore, Ross Dwelly, your fellow tight end brethren. And then Eric Armstead has been out for a couple weeks for them. Still trying to get back healthy. He is out today.
I think we should talk about the defensive backfield.
I think we should. It'll be Emmanuel Forbes. It'll be Cam Curl. It'll be Terrell Burgess and Quan Martin, kind of splitting that other safety duty. Quan obviously spending a lot of time in the nickel. And then it'll be Tariq Castro-Fields starting on the outside for Washington.
Yeah, I mean, tough game to get your, kind of first significant playing time. This is one of those games defensively where you're a little bit concerned because I think all the stuff that San Fran does really well, our defense has struggled with recently. There's a ton of motions, ton of shifts. They get in bunches, tight formations. How do you pass that off? The other thing that I think would be really interesting to watch today is how do you tackle this group of skill position players for the San Francisco 49ers? Because when you watch them, they break more tackles than anybody, and when you watch our defense, the Commanders' defense specifically last week against the Jets, they had 19 missed tackles or something like that. And so while I think the defense is playing better as a whole, I think if you're not going to tackle well today, this is a group that can make you look absolutely silly in terms of creating stuff after the catch, explosive plays. I go back to the Giants game San Francisco played early this year, and there's numerous opportunities where Debo's catching the ball on a flat, on a screen or something like that, and he takes a play that is very mundane, very benign, and turns it into an explosive play or a touchdown. So this group of defensive backs, I think Forbes is going to have an interesting challenge today. Castro-Fields is going to have an interesting challenge today. But safeties, how well are you guys going to tackle today? Because that's going to be so critical to making sure that we don't give up an explosive play, which this defense has had a hard time doing throughout the season.
Yeah, communication becomes key. And, if you're Terrell Burgess and you want to make yourself a little bit of money today and solidify your spot on an NFL roster.
I was going to say, even just make sure you want to be playing next year, right?
Can you, on a roster versus a practice squad or whatever, show that you can communicate back there. And it's hard when you're a new guy, but everyone's going to be a new guy. Mm-hmm. But this is also a chance, frankly, for Camp Curl to obviously he's not going to be fighting for his NFL life, but for a roster or for a bigger contract, they've had so many communication issues this year, and now Cam is the only guy back there with any real experience. I mean,
Yeah.
Terrell's played some NFL football.
Yeah.
Obviously, Quan's been playing the last couple of weeks. But Cam's the guy back there. He has got to get them organized. And that, to me, that is my biggest holdup on paying him is like, you can't be a key part of a defense that's this bad and expect to get a gigantic contract.
Yeah.
And that is what Cam Curl wants here in a couple of weeks.
No, I think that's 100% right. And I think one of the things that, has been a little disappointing about his plays, he hasn't made a lot of big explosive splash plays. He's been Cam Curl in that he's been very consistent with the tackling and relatively with position. Obviously, he's been involved in some big plays given up. But I think that the disappointing thing for me is just the lack of great communication from that group. I think that's something that when you talk to Fred, when you talk to people who coach defense, London Fletcher's another guy that comes to mind, is just a lack of communication in the secondary. And I think Cam has a responsibility to that. We're not very critical of Cam because I think he's a good football player, but this is one area where I'd like to see him kind of grow up a little bit and say, I can take charge of this secondary. I can make some of these checks. I can get this directed. I can get this, this adjustment to motion communicated. And, today he's going to have to do that, or it's going to be a long day for the defense.
And, by the way, you better do all that and then be prepared to stop Christian McCaffrey. So your run fits, all that kind of stuff becomes super critical today. I think this is a huge, as we'll get to our pick 6 next, I think this is a huge day for the defensive tackles as well.
Yeah.
And can they make all this other stuff moot? Can they make it irrelevant because they just are super disruptive? Well, we'll talk about it. Our pick 6 every Friday on the Hoffman Show. My producer Anthony Haney and I pick 6 players that we think are key for the Commanders. Lately, it's been to be relatively competitive, but in theory to win the football game. So we'll run that list by Logan and let you hear it if you missed us on Friday. Next, it is the Take Command pregame show on a burgundy and gold game day. Take Command pregame show on a burgundy and gold game day. We've reached the standing portion of the show, where Logan and I just are tired of sitting in the same wooden stools for 3 hours. It's also the portion of the show that if you watch on YouTube, you realize there's a large height discrepancy between me and a former NFL tight end. Of course, that is former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen. I am Craig Hoffman here on the Take Command pregame show on a burgundy and gold game day. We're also live, of course, on YouTube at 106.7 The Fan, at the Team 980, and always live on the free Odyssey app. On the Team 980 YouTube and the Odyssey app, you can also find the Hoffman Show, the radio show I host, from 4 to 7 each and every weekday afternoon. And at 6 o'clock on that show on Fridays, Logan, we do our Pick Six. We pick 6 players who we think will have the biggest impact on the Commanders on Sunday. And I pick half of the list. My producer, Anthony Haney, picks half the list. You know this by now. Hopefully most of the audience knows this by now. Now everyone here at Tap Sports Bar knows it as well. And so we go over our list here on a Sunday. I got the second pick. Anthony started. He picked Cornelius Lucas, who'll get the start at left tackle today. He gets to see our old pal. He gets our old pal Chase Young today. Who has had a very interesting time in San Francisco. Yeah. He has been largely the same player, but what he has done for them, and Ben Standig wrote about this in The Athletic, he has really unlocked their pass rush. Yeah. Nick Bosa's sack numbers have gotten significantly higher since he arrived, even if Chase hasn't actually had a ton of production himself.
No, I totally agree, and I think he's going to be Cornelius. I actually like this matchup for the Commanders. Because I think Corn, like when you watch them in training camp, when you watch them in one-on-ones, Corn is such a big man. I think people sleep on how big he is. He's like 6'8". I think he's 325 or 330. He's got these long Spider-Man arms, and Chase doesn't do well with guys of that kind of length and that kind of power. So I think this is going to be a tough matchup for Chase. I think it's always going to be competitive, right? But to me, the matchup that's more interesting is the matchup on the other side. I keep forgetting the backup's name. What's his name?
Trent Scott.
Trent Scott. He's going to get Bosa in this matchup, and this is your second string right tackle, your swing tackle position, and I think
he's your fourth tackle. Because normally, if Wiley's out,
would be the swing.
Corn would be the guy, and so it's really your fourth tackle.
And so this is a really tough matchup, and I think this is in terms of just matchup. He's a guy that I think is a very good football player, but he lacks kind of that elite trait to play high-level tackle in the NFL. What I mean, he lacks that kind of elite arm length. I think he's a guy that might even be a better guard. But Nick Bosa has shown a proclivity and a history of just eating guys up when it comes to pass rush who are not in that kind of top-tier pass protector. And there are certain guys that just have a knack for it. I think Nick Bosa's got a knack for that. So how do you manage that today? Because I think Corn actually matches up fairly well with Chase. It's really that other matchup on the right side that gets me a little bit concerned.
I think Scott has only played right tackle, at least here.
Yeah.
That's the thing, too, is like, well, if Corn's a swing guy, could you put Trent Scott at left tackle
right,
and
maybe.
put Corn over there?
That's not a bad idea, actually.
Obviously, if it's going super haywire, you kick Cosme out. They called up Alex Akimbolu off of the practice squad as well. So those are your options. None of them are good because there isn't really so much thing as a good option against Nick Bosa. By the way, I forgot to mention this in the last segment when I told everybody that Andrew Wiley was out and that Charles Leno was out, et cetera, that the injury report is brought to you by the Center for Advanced Orthopedics. More physicians, more locations, more advanced care centered around one thing. You visit CFAortho.com. They pay for that, so it's very important to get in.
That's why you're professional.
Allegedly, they pay me, so by definition, yeah. Cam Curl is my first pick, and we talked about why in the last segment. So don't need to rehash too much, but when you've got all the communication stuff, and you're the veteran in the back end, you're the guy with the experience. That's super important. The part we didn't mention is he's also their best matchup on George Kittle.
Yeah, George Kittle or Christian McCaffrey. Like in years past when Christian McCaffrey was in Carolina, he matched up with him. So because Cam Curl gives you that flexibility, it's like, who do you want on George? Who do you want on Christian? Maybe Quan takes that other
Quan's
matchup.
going to have a huge responsibility.
I think in this game specifically with Cam Curl, it's not only how you do in coverage, but how are you fitting the run? Because we talk about, I think, not in super detail, but pretty extensively Christian McCaffrey, but the scheme and how it elevates them and how they use their receivers to block linebackers and really kind of find creative angles in the run game, and they stress secondary players to make tackles. So can Cam defeat blocks with his hands, get it on runs, and kind of prevent some of these younger corners, specifically Emmanuel Forbes, from having to be tackling Christian McCaffrey one-on-one in the hole. So.
Yeah, you saw a really great example of this last night. Donovan Wilson for the Cowboys was phenomenal at blowing up some of the Lions' run stuff last night, taking on guards and just bowling through them.
He's the guy that plays like linebacker for them, though, right?
He's a bigger safety.
Yeah.
Curse is. Both their safeties are big. Curse
they've
is like 6'4",
definitely
but he's
got like a style of guy to fill that out.
It's amazing what having a organizational vision will do. What? Hit number 3 on our list, Anthony's second pick, was Terry McLaurin. Just the ability to create some of those big plays. We saw it as soon as Jacoby gets in. Can he create that with Sam? We talked earlier in the show about the kind of the traits that Bucky Brooks and Daniel Jeremiah pointed out on their podcast of what really is a through line between elite wide receivers, that play strength, that toughness. And one of the things they use as an example is when guys catch the ball and can break tackles and have like an energy to them. You see it last night with CeeDee Lamb and Amon-Ra St. Brown. There's no doubt in my mind that Terry has that. Getting the ball in his hands quickly obviously is a huge deal for them today.
Yeah, and I think today, if you got any shot, you got to find a way to manufacture some big plays, and he's been one of the more consistent guys in this offense about manufacturing those plays. So how does EB maximize him? I think the big thing with Sam coming into the starting role is, can Sam just give him some opportunities? It might not look open, but just kind of throw that ball out there, give him a shot at making a play for you and using some of that competitiveness and physical toughness to elevate the offense. Yeah,
and again, if you are just tuning in and you missed the news this morning, Sam Howell is starting for Washington after Jacoby Brissett's hamstring injury midweek will keep him out. Back to the defensive side, number 4 in the pick 6, Cody Barton. And really, it's a lot of the same reasons that I said Cam Curl. You got to have the communication. You got to have everything organized. You got to have the front in the right place to get lined up against this extensive, detailed run game that the San Francisco 49ers run. And, if you're not on Kittle, you're not on McCaffrey, you're on the other one. Yeah. So Cam's going to have one. Barton probably has the other. So huge day for Cody Barton.
And I think also the thing that Kyle does so well and this offense in San Francisco does so well is it manipulates the linebackers, and it forces you to have to kind of be of two worlds. I'm either fitting the run or I'm covering the pass. And Cody's actually, to his credit, over the last couple of weeks done a really good job. I don't know if it's through film study or just general preparation of being good in that role. This is going to be kind of like the master's test of what he's seen the last couple of weeks. Can I fit the runs effectively, and can I get in coverage and kind of fill in these kind of deep dig holes that they are so good at hitting? We watched a play earlier this week on the Command Center show that I do, and there's so much space right over the heads of those linebackers in the New York game. I mentioned that already, but he's got a huge task in that regard. Can I fit? Can I get guys lined up? I would almost consider moving this up to number 1. Like, he's going to have a huge role in this defense in terms of getting people lined up, getting the checks communicated, and then just his play is going to need to be super high level today because they are trying to manipulate him as much as possible with their offense.
Yeah, Cody Barton is going to sleep well tonight. He will be thoroughly exhausted after this one. And then number 5, the defensive ends. That was Anthony's last pick. If you want to make some plays defensively, marrying that pass rush and the coverage is important, and they've had very little pass rush as of late. The other thing, too, though, is the way San Francisco runs it with that outside zone. Yeah. A lot of the play action off of it. Keep Christian McCaffrey or Deebo Samuel or whoever else off the edge. Right. The one thing that I can say James Smith-Williams and Casey Toohill do a really good job of, like an NFL really good job of, is setting a really hard, and sometimes I think with James especially, high edge. There's been some times where you wish James could make a play when he gets that penetration, but he will string something out, make it bubble around. And so that was kind of the rationale for Anthony picking them, which I think is a good pick.
I think it's an excellent pick, and I think it's to understand like how much leverage is on them. So, for example, an outside zone, the back is taking a landmark to the outside leg of the ghost tight end or the tight end to that side, and if the back cannot advance that grasp because the edge has been shortened, it kills the stretch run. So San Francisco knows that. They double-team the heck out of those guys. They're bringing receivers. They're bringing tight ends. They're bringing fullbacks to double-team that edge player to ensure that horizontal stretch. And because they present so many various looks to that position, it's going to be exceptionally important in this game. Exceptionally important that they are, physically dialed in, but also mentally. Like, am I getting the double team? Can I skate this guy? Can I do this? Am I using my hands? Is it run away? Is it run 2? Is it gap scheme? Is it outside zone? It's a lot on their plates, and if they play well and can set those edges like you're talking about, there is a shot here. But it's the reason no team has been able to really stop San Francisco running the ball. Even Baltimore, they couldn't keep Christian McCaffrey under, from getting that 100-yard mark. It's because of all the complexity and nuance that goes into making those defensive ends just have to play a bunch of different looks.
Yeah, Baltimore's way of stopping San Francisco from running it was
picking the ball off.
Get some turnovers, take the ball away,
which we
run
could
up
do
the
too.
score.
We could do that too.
That would be cool. That would work if you just if anybody wants to, any burgundy and gold clad men. Although at this point, if you're still driving to the game, you're probably in trouble because you're a little late. But we can get the message.
Oh yeah, it is at 12:30.
Yeah,
yeah.
We're almost done. We got 24 minutes left here of this radio show. By the way, Grant Paulson will join us next. But not before I tell you the last in our pick 6, defensive tackles. It was my last pick because if you need plays to be made to transition that smoothly, if you need plays to be made, those are the playmakers, Allen and Payne. And if they can just stop, like all this other stuff doesn't matter if Daron Payne makes the guard whiff and just gets to the backfield.
Right.
Like that is the best way to ultimately stop this offense. It's a tall task. They scheme it up. Kyle knows how good those guys are. They're going to have extra focus on them. But do
you have the depth chart for San Francisco? Because I think they've got a couple guys injured, right? On the interior, like Banks, their starting left guard, is out. I don't know if their right guard. I think the guy who started the season is out potentially, but they're a little bit banged up on the inside. So if you're going to maximize your ability and kind of draw favorable matchups, because I will say, like, as much as I love Casey Toohill and James Smith-Williams, like, they're not getting sacks on Trent Williams. Like, that's just how good he is, right? Their right tackle, I think, is a guy that can give up stuff. But I think the advantage from a personnel standpoint for Washington is definitely on the interior from a pass rush and run game standpoint. And Kyle knows that. They scheme up accordingly. They do all this different stuff accordingly. But it would be nice if those guys come up and make some splash plays. And you alluded to this. They played better last week, those two guys inside. The edge guys generated more pressure, which was good to see. Can they build off that performance? Because, like you said, if you can generate a consistent pass rush and alleviate some of the pressure on the back end, you might be in a good spot. And then the other thing I just kind of tag on, stream of consciousness here, is what kind of pressure is Ron bringing in this game to help maximize that rush?
No doubt. It's worth remembering that until the game-winning field goal last week, the defense did pitch a shutout in the second half.
Yeah.
Now, the Jets' offense is horrible, but they did it. Obviously, you have an anti-horrible offense today, one of the best in the league.
An anti-horrible.
Anti-horrible in San Francisco. When we get back, we'll go out to FedEx Field. Grant Paulson will join us live. And we wrap things up with our game changers and predictions here on the Take Command pregame show. State Command pregame show. Burgundy and Gold game day. I'm Craig Hoffman. He is Logan Paulsen. And joining us now is our buddy Grant Paulson. I'm assuming from FedEx Field, Grant, on a holiday day, New Year's Eve. Are you at FedEx?
I am here. They have announced this morning, fellas, that this game is sold out. It's actually their third highest attended, or at least ticket purchased. How many of them will be Commanders fans is the question. Luckily for them, I guess this is one of those similar jersey color combinations, so the aerial shots might not be as alarming.
Well, the game will be, so that'll make up for it, you know? There's
very possibly.
There is that. I know that you and I were texting about this week, in part because we're like, going back and forth on Twitter just invites all kinds of goonery.
Yeah.
And like you, Logan, Grant and I are friends, so we don't need that. That's a recurring joke from earlier in the show, Grant. You don't need to worry about it. The point is that we were texting about this. You are much more, I think, excited that Sam Howell is playing today. This is how you would have had it all along. Why and how do you think that he'll do today?
I guess excited, I would say, is probably not the right word. I don't think it's going to go particularly well at this point, but I just think this is the way it should have been. For me, it's more black and white, frankly. It's less about, the gray areas and the context of this situation. A couple of things. Number one, it's week 17 of an 18-week lost season. I want the young quarterback with potential on the field, not the journeyman veteran backup who may not be here in several months, just as a rule of thumb. So that's number one. Number two, I thought the idea of announcing, and this is what they did, they didn't say it in these words, but that this player is broken, that we can't possibly ask him to go out there and play against these violent defenders from San Francisco and throw meat into the lion's den. I just thought it was lazy coaching. I mean, this is the job. The job is find a way for it not to be awful. Find a way for him not to be 6 of 22. If you need to run the ball more, do it. If you need to get him more layups, do it. You look at the expected completion percentage on balls out of Sam Howell's hand this season, it's 30th among quarterbacks in the NFL. Number one is Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City, where Bieniemy was last year, oh, by the way. So to me, what is coaching on offense, coordinating, or being a head coach? It's helping your players get through tough games, especially when you're developing at the end of the year, and this idea that if he played, he'd crawl into the fetal position and never be the same again. That was lazy. Coach him through it. Find a way for him not to be 6 of 22. Figure out some layups and get him to. No one's expecting you to win. He doesn't have to play great, but get him through the game in a way that isn't embarrassing. And they didn't think they could do that, so they benched him. I thought that was ridiculous. And then the weirdest thing ever happened, and now he's starting again.
Well, I mean, don't you think this is, again, something – because it's not – to me, it's not just one game. It's been the last 4 or 5 games, Craig. Does that sound about right?
4 is really when it's been super downhill.
And he just looks like
bad games in a row.
Yeah, and he's struggled pretty tremendously in those games and really not looked like a shadow of the guy that, we saw earlier in the season. Isn't that part of coaching, too, is identifying, hey, man, maybe we got to sit this guy down to give him an opportunity to kind of reboot and find himself, or you don't think that there's any validity to that?
Maybe, but I would have done that a week or two ago, maybe. I don't now at the literally in January. That's when we do this. When the games don't matter at all, the results don't matter at all. I mean, is the fear that you break him irreparably? Is one more bad game after 5 bad games going to do that? Where's the line of delineation there? Is it true that a baseball player, he could be in such a slump and he just needs to sit out a series, right, and not have at bats basically and go back to the drawing board? Yeah, I guess that's possible. But then there's a whole other conversation we need to have that hasn't been had this week, which is how did he get so broken? How did we go from a month ago, people feeling okay about this guy possibly being the starter, not just next season, but for the long term, to now him being, kind of based on your question and what the team is suggesting, so terrible that he can't possibly play against San Francisco because he's broken. But how did that happen? I think people have to answer some tough questions, whether you're coordinating the offense or you're the head coach. And I haven't heard, any kind of mea culpa in that regard yet. The only other thing I would say, too, is, in reference to, Rivera this week, it would be a lot easier for me to play that game, Logan, where you go, all right, it's 5 straight weeks. It's really, really bad. If a month ago he wasn't answering questions from the beat about the defensive line by saying, well, we found the quarterback. Like you can't play both games. You can't say we found the quarterback literally a month ago and then bench the guy because you're afraid that he's going to be so bad a couple weeks later. Like that makes no sense to me.
Well, I think that a lot of what you're saying makes sense to me, and I agree with in terms of like the larger questions of how did we get here. I do think that there are, and like the criticism as well of like, okay, maybe weeks ago or not answering questions, which I'm sure you on your show and did as I did on my show, which I said, this is a ridiculous thing. What are you doing, Ron Rivera? We're not dumb. Quit pretending that we are. But that doesn't mean that it wasn't the right thing right now. And I think that's maybe where like the interesting conversation about player development comes in of like, is the best thing for Sam to use the baseball analogy you used, to get that couple series off now, even if it should have happened? Is it better late than never? Because, he has, like, I wouldn't say he played well against Dallas, but his final numbers, he did throw for 300 yards, and that was 4 games ago. The Giants, it's 256, a couple of, or that was 5 games ago.
Good
it really
performances, right?
Yeah, but I wouldn't say they were good, but they're in those games. The first half of the Dallas game, they're in it, then it completely falls apart. Versus the last 3 complete blowouts, terrible results at the time of his exit, and it just feels like you need to make a change. So I get why they didn't do it earlier, and I guess the thing that I would ask is like right now, without this larger context, is it the best thing for him to be playing? And I think reasonable people could certainly disagree on that.
So, yeah, but okay, so in a vacuum, if your point is just, is this possibly beneficial to him in the long term, I can say yes. And if, like, that's the end of the conversation, fine. I guess we're probably having 2 discussions because I am really interested in everything around that. How did we get here? Why are we here? I watched every other game every single week. Guys like Jake Browning are slicing and dicing defenses. How did it get so bad with this player that they thought a month ago was an answer? Like, that is significant and important, no?
Oh, yeah, for sure. But I guess we can care a little less when all the people who made all of those decisions aren't going to be here in 10 days.
Sure, but I also don't need to then care what they think about his development either.
Right.
And what's best for him.
Yeah, it's just a matter of not screwing it up any further, which I guess
and that's the other
today.
part is like,
yeah.
And I'd be interested. I mean, Logan probably has a thought on this as a player, but like the idea of does him playing poorly again, is it, taking out a shovel and digging the hole deeper in terms of what he ultimately has to climb out of? I just think that based on what we've seen and where we're at, when you get benched 2 straight games, you play at this level. Now they go with Brissett over you, at least by design, before what happened this week. It kind of answers the question for me about whether or not you're an answer type quarterback. There's not a long list of guys who have had this happen and then go on to have great careers.
Well, I think that's the thing that's kind of disappointing about the whole process is this, and I think that's kind of to your point. It's like, was the scaffolding, was the infrastructure there to support him enough? I think we all kind of agree that they probably could have handled it a different way. But I think, in terms of his development, I don't think it's a bad thing he's getting benched or he was going to get benched when he had been playing so poorly before. I think sometimes you just need to get guys out of the fire. It's like, I've been in games like that or in seasons like that where you just can't get right mentally, and sometimes you take a step back, and the coaches need to help you do that. So, and I think also there's a motivation by Ron and the staff. They want to win a game, And I know that people don't want to hear that.
That I have like no. That they can want that, but that just doesn't matter to me at all. Like that's, good for them, I guess. But
right, they should want to win. They are the coach that's currently in charge, even if they're only in charge.
No, I agree. Yeah. I'm not saying they shouldn't want to. I'm just saying that's not interesting to me. That's all.
Right. No, 100%. Is there anything else that you were interested in today beyond how Sam rebounds and what happens? I mean, obviously, defensively, there's all these injuries. Anything else on your radar today?
Yeah, it's a good question. There's guys on this team that matter. I want to see how Jahan Dotson finishes the season. Who's really, frankly, other than Sam the last few weeks, who's had a bigger fall off from expectations in week 1 to now than him? I think a lot of us felt like they had unearthed a gem and maybe drafted a potential star, and he's played a lot more like a depth wide receiver for much of this season in terms of production. So I'll be watching him closely. Their running back room, I think, is pretty good and is interesting. My guess is Gibson will walk. I don't think they should pay him. But with Robinson and Rodriguez as stumpers, maybe you add some speed and a home run hitter this offseason. So I'll be curious to watch, coming back now, B-Rob getting healthy, what happens in the backfield. And then the secondary is interesting enough. I mean, I just think Emmanuel Forbes and Quan Martin are going to play more and have bigger roles today than they've had at any point all year. I know that the guys that drafted them are going to be gone, and those picks right now don't look like they were good picks, but they're still going to be on the important roles for a couple seasons. Can they play? How much better is Forbes than when we last saw him? Martin as a safety and as a corner and in the nickel, does he look capable of some type of production next year, helping them out on the depth chart? I think those are things that are all worth watching today.
For sure. Grant Paulson, you can catch him weekdays 2 to 6:30 on 106.7 The Fan, of course, live as well on the free Odyssey app. GP, I'm going to watch this one at home today, so you and Rooster spread out and have a great old time in the press
I was
box.
literally about to ask you, Rainey, you can move down a little bit. Craig's not coming today.
Yeah, I'll be back next week.
I got nobody to my left and nobody to my right, so me and Slashy might not be banging elbows today.
Yeah, no, there's just I don't need to come out there today. Next week will be an interesting post-game locker room, but I don't need to come out there today.
It's slim. I'll tell you, it's slim pickings. There are so many people that are out sick today. It's crazy. It's a thin press box.
I heard some sniffles on multiple podcasts.
Yeah.
So I hope everyone out there is feeling all right. GP, enjoy the game, sir. I'll see you back at the shop this week.
By the way, the 49ers coming out to the field, Trent Williams and Chase Young leading through the tunnel, just so you guys know.
Yeah, that sounds about right. All right, thanks, Grant. That's Grant Paulson, everybody. Grant and Danny, 2 to 6:30. Always appreciate his time, especially here on our New Year's Eve edition of the Take Command pregame show. When we get back, we will wrap things up quickly with our game changers and our predictions with Logan. I'm Craig. It's the Take Command pregame show on a Burgundy and Gold game day.
You're out.
7.
right, we got just under 5 minutes left here at Tap Sports Bar, filling up here at MGM National Harbor. We got Raiders fans in the house. We got Ravens fans in the house. Commanders fans, Cowboys fans, Dolphins fans getting ready to watch their teams play here on all of the televisions at Tap Sports Bar, where we're going to have a lot of good football today, and also Commanders 49ers, Logan.
Stop.
All right. I'll be here. Actually, no, I won't. I'll be here for one more week. We'll be back here next weekend. One final pregame show. We're also live on YouTube post-game, so make sure that you subscribe to the Team 980 and 106.7 The Fan on YouTube. It's time now for our difference makers of the game, presented by Zips Cleaners. Zips Cleaners knows that looking good makes all the difference, whether on the field, on the job, or wherever life takes you. At just $3.29 or less per garment, we make it easy and affordable to look your best. Find a Zips near you at zipscleaners.com. Logan, who is your Zips Cleaners difference maker of the game?
That's a great question. It's a great question. My difference maker of the game today, I'm going to say, is Cody Barton. And I think for all the reasons we talked about in our pick 6, he's going to have to be instrumental in terms of fitting runs, communicating coverages, handling play action. He's been, I'd say, I don't know, maybe most improved or the most exciting player to kind of watch on film the past couple of weeks. But again, the one big blemish that I think about when I think about his game, not always the most effective at fitting runs, obviously involved in that explosive play last week against the Jets to Breece Hall. I think that's a Benjamin St. Juste issue, but that's a conversation for another time. But he's going to have a huge role today. Coverage, tackling, fitting runs, communicating stuff, a lot on his plate, especially against this really complicated offense for the 49ers. Yeah,
that's a great one. It's definitely high on my list. Am I going to do this? I think I am. Logan, I'm going to be stubborn.
What are you going to do?
I am going to be really stubborn because
Brian Robinson?
That is exactly who I'm picking. If the Commanders want to be competitive today, if Eric Bieniemy, for the first time all season, would like to make Sam Howell's job easier, because Sam is starting today. If you're just getting out of church or whatever it is that you have not heard the news, Sam Howell is starting. As Jacoby Brissett's hamstring injury is going to prevent him from playing. He suffered in practice on Thursday. If Eric Bieniemy, for the first time all season, would like to make Sam Howell's job easier, he will simply tell Sam, more times than he has all season, turn around, hand the ball to number 8. Turn around, hand the ball to Brian Robinson. Let's get the screen game going. B-Rob's been excellent out of the backfield just as a general receiver. He is back after 2 weeks off with his hamstring injury. Please, for the love of all things, Sam Howell being healthy, let's have Brian Robinson be a difference maker today.
I love it. I don't think it's going to happen.
I don't either.
Yeah.
But I'm going to try to will it into existence until, well, we only have one more game next week. All right, Logan, that means it is time for our predictions. The 49ers are, last time I checked, 13.5-point favorites. Let's double-check that number. Is it up? The board here at Tap Sports Bar is around the corner, so I'm going to have to go to the internet and see what the internet says, even though we are sitting in an active sports book right now. That is the nature of where we're sitting. It is now up to 14. 14 is the line. Can the Commanders at the very least cover? Can they compete today?
I don't think so. I don't think they cover that score. I think with all the injuries they got in the secondary, it's going to be really, really challenging for them to be competitive. I think one of the things we talked about in the preview is just how effective this team is at creating space. You've got a whole bunch of guys who haven't worked a ton together. It's going to be a lot of space. You got to tackle well. Forbes has been tackling better but didn't tackle well early this year. They leverage the corners into the run fits so much, probably the most in the NFL. I think they're just going to have a hard time stopping the run, stopping the pass today. And I think Sam's going to struggle tremendously against that Divas. I hope I'm wrong, but I'm thinking like maybe 10 points offensively, and I think the defense is probably giving up 30-ish points. So that's what I'm kind of feeling as we've gone through the pregame show. Usually I get more optimistic.
It's gone the other way.
Yeah.
I agree with you. San Francisco, look, last week against Baltimore, San Francisco in the first half, if they don't have some bad luck, is playing really good football.
Yeah.
I thought they were the better team in the first half that had some bad luck. And then the bad luck spiraled, and then the Baltimore Ravens kicked their butts in the second half. And that's against Baltimore. This is not Baltimore. I'll take the Niners big as well. Be back to talk about it on Tuesday on the radio. We'll see you post-game for the stream. Thanks for listening to the Take Command pregame show.